Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 10th Program and Personnel Committee meeting this evening. Will you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First on the agenda is invitation for public comment for the Program and Personnel Committee. Anyone here wishing to speak to the committee? Going once, going twice. Okay. I didn't notice anyone signed in, so I think we're good to move on. First up is the LHS. How do you say the acronym? ECOS or ECOS or ECOS club presentation.
Good evening. I am Dr. Khan. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you tonight. Is this the best place to be standing? Okay.
Yes, that's the perfect place to be standing.
And for your collective continued support of Ecos Club and the work that we're doing to promote sustainability here on campus. Before the students begin the official presentation, I'd like to take the opportunity to express our collective gratitude to our principal, Dr. K, for his support and the investment of his time and energy to keep our projects alive and well. I also want to acknowledge the amazing support that we've received from our buildings and ground staff, who we count as partners and consultants in the work that we do. Both Tom and Chris are servant leaders and work tirelessly to remove the barriers that block our progress. The goal of our presentation tonight is to briefly tell you about an opportunity to work together on a capital project to help reduce pollution in Butler Lake and to make you aware of federal and county level grants that could help pay for such a project. Since all of our students know the daring mission statement backwards and forwards, we've challenged them tonight to present the daring statement to you backwards, starting with the G in global and ending with the D in dreamers and doers.
Hello, I'm Finley Roman. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a junior. So of course, the first letter that we will start with is global. Ethos Club formed with the intention of addressing global policy issues. However, we learned early on that to do this, there are a lot of issues that we can address locally. And it all starts in our own backyard. That's why Ethos has focused on designing and implementing many one-year student-led projects that help include plans that students start in August and end in May to improve sustainability on our campus and in our community. Last year, our project focused on installing solar panels to power the Courtyard Prairie Classroom water fountain. This year, we are working on a comprehensive shoreline restoration project on the shoreline of Butler Lake, on which lots of progress has already been done. Each of our projects involve community subject matter experts who serve as our mentors. We do our own fundraising by applying for grants and asking for donations. If we are fully funded, the total cost of our Butler Lake Shoreline project this year will reach $1,800, and all of which is done through grants.
I'm Adelia Herman. I'm a junior as well, and I use she, her pronouns, but they is fine. We are nimble because we've learned a lot this year about wetlands, ecological restoration, flooding, erosion, and native plants. And we've worked with over a dozen mentors who helped teach us what we should do on Butler Lake and what the school is so far could improve upon. We wanted to apply what we have learned to continue our work and address the new problems that these mentors have brought up with our shoreline. One challenge that we uncovered is the water quality. Butler Lake is part of the Bull Creek sub-watershed, meaning that the land that on our school campus is ultimately drained into the Bull Creek before it empties into the Des Plaines River at Independence Grove. The Bull Creek watershed is considered impaired by EDA standards under the Clean Water Act due to the high levels of phosphorus and separately due to high levels of total suspended solids.
My name is Zoe Joseph. I'm a junior and my pronouns are she, her. We are inquisitive. We wondered what role does our shoreline play in the watershed's impairment and what actions could we take to help mitigate the issue? After consulting with our project mentors, we have a much better understanding of the issue facing our watershed and the opportunities we have to address those issues. We are resilient. We believe that helping to address water quality and shoreline erosion will help make our campus more climate resilient, which is important as Lake County is expecting to receive much more periods of intensive rainfall like the floods we saw during July of 2017. LHS was built on a floodplain of a wetland, and part of the northwest parking lot is actually built on a wetland itself. If the school were to be magically deleted, we would not be allowed to build on it under today's laws. This leaves our school with the uncomfortable job of trying to protect our infrastructure while stewarding land that was designed to be wet.
We are aware of our impact on Butler Lake. We know that our campus plays a role in contributing pollutants to our watershed. Our parking lot runoff and runoff from our sports fields carry excess nutrients, road salt, and solid particles that flow directly into the lake. Pollution that is picked up by rainfall and snowmelt is referred to as non-point source pollution and can come from oil, pet waste, pesticide, herbicide, fertilizer, road salt, sediment, and other contaminants that ends up on the ground or in our waters naturally or through human activity. Being aware means that we seek to understand. Having a system-level understanding of the issues we face leads us to seek a system-level solution to address our relationship with Butler Lake. We invited back one of our mentors, a project manager for Kimley Horn, who has served as a consultant for the Village of Libertyville on the topic of stormwater management issues in the past. We asked him to help us understand sustainable solutions for replacing the parking lot in the northwest corner of the school. This 2.4 acre space is currently occupied by an impermeable parking lot that is built on top of the wetland and its floodplain. As the parking lot is coming to the end of its serviceable life, we see this area as an opportunity to put forward a better solution and build on our progress in restoring the shoreline.
I'm Nick. I'm a senior. We are doers. You can do what you did with the parking lot by the new LHS pool. Bioswales with openings for rainwater allow native plants to uptake some of the excess water and filter out pollutants before proceeding into the watershed. Our pool parking lot is filled with diverse native plants that do a good job managing the water. The excess water from this parking lot flows underground to the south side of our campus into the retention pond. There is nowhere for us to pump the excess water from the northwest parking lot. We would need to create several staggered bioswales to slow and infiltrate the water, which may present a problem if we are not allowed to reduce the number of total parking spots available on our campus. We could be dreamers and dream big. Permeable pavement allows water to seep into the ground, which allows it to catch and temporarily store the first ½ inch to an inch of rainfall, trapping sediments and pollutants which can be filtered out by the substrate before the water enters the groundwater or lake. Permeable pavers seem like a good option, but they are very expensive and require maintenance like vacuuming to keep the spaces open. Aggressive snowplows can potentially damage the pavement. Ultimately, even the experts don't know if permeable pavement is the best choice for our entire parking lot because the water table is so high. The water table is the line that marks the top of the groundwater. If the ground is essentially saturated with water before a rain event, the permeable pavement is not likely to be able to trap and hold additional water inputs that may be prone to flooding, especially near the lake. There aren't a lot of examples of permeable pavement used on land that is considered wetland or land immediately next to wetlands because we simply don't build parking lots in these places anymore.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm a junior. So permeable pavement comes in different forms. We know that there are several types of permeable pavement available, but they all have similar benefits and drawbacks. As seen by the image, one of the drawbacks is the cost, but private institutions and other companies have access funding. All right. Okay. Permeable pavement is not a new idea. Some of the illustrations that you'll see are permeable pavement projects in Illinois between the years 2006 and 2011. The fact that so many places in Illinois have adapted permeable pavement as projects give us confidence that even with our snowy and icy winters, permeable pavement is a confident solution, and that it'll work for stormwater management. US Cellular Field has 265,000 square feet of permeable pavement parking lot.
My name is Megan. I'm a sophomore. My pronouns are she, her. A neighborhood in Moline eliminated the need for drainage infrastructure or a detention pond by using permeable pavers. The pavers were designed to accommodate heavier municipal vehicles for Aurora Police Headquarters.
Hi, my name is Gavin Goldberg. This is Warrenville Road, and Warrenville is the first Midwest community to use permeable pavers on public roads. This is Buckingham Fountain in Chicago. Dominican University eliminated the need for a detention pond after building permeable pavement parking lots. And light-colored pavers have added the benefit of reflecting light energy, reducing the urban heat island effect from the concrete.
Hi, my name is Briar. Morton Arboretum received an EPA grant to install permeable pavers that could withstand weight from buses bringing visitors to the museum. This community college in Illinois faced the same issues as LHS, being adjacent to a wetland. They have since opted to install 2 more permeable parking areas on their campus to responsibly manage their stormwater and be good stewards to their wetlands. And closer to home, Riviera Festival in Highland Park.
Hello, I'm Sarah Jacobs. I use she, her pronouns. So as you can see here, the Bull Creek watershed is considered impaired due to total phosphorus and total suspended solids. There are 2 good things about the Bull Creek watershed being impaired. First, the 2 criteria that we meet for impairment are relatively easy to address. Sediment and phosphorus from runoff and erosion can be addressed through mitigation measures like bioswales, permeable pavement, and shoreline restoration. The other good news is that the funding available for our impairment allows us to fund most of our project. Bull Creek has an approved watershed management plan on file with the EPA, giving us access to apply for federal funding and capital improvement projects that align with the goals of reducing pollutants that are causing the impairment of our watershed. We are fairly certain that we would qualify for these grants. We have seen examples of past awardees who have used the grant funding to install permeable parking lots. The grant pays for 60% of the project expenses. We improve our chances of being awarded the grant if we include an educational and/or research element to our proposed project. In the process of trying to acquire money for our shoreline restoration project, we have uncovered other possible ways of acquiring funding that we could apply to our 40% share of the project cost. Funding from places like Lake County Stormwater Management Commission. Our mentor from Kimley Horn inspired us with an idea for a possible way forward. We can incorporate areas of bioswales, areas of permeable parking lots, and areas of traditional asphalt. And then we can add to the scientific body of knowledge by conducting a study comparing the effectiveness of these different parking lot solutions. The underdrains could be constructed so that ports near the lake could be accessed for water sampling. Together with our contracts at Lake County Health Department Ecological Services, we can test the outflow water for different areas in the different areas for phosphorus, suspended solids, and chloride ion. Chloride ion is related to salt use, and levels have historically exceeded the EPA limits in Butler Lake. Students in Ecos and AP Environmental Science can analyze, present, and possibly even publish this research. The research can also help inform our future decisions for how to best plan for and implement capital improvements along the shoreline.
We have to move relatively quickly to make the August 1st deadline for submitting an EPA grant. ECOS is willing to help facilitate the grant writing process if the board would support our club meeting over the summer. Either way, we hope to work with the board in the coming years so that we can plan for future shoreline projects synergistically with the board district's capital projects. Thank you so much for your time.
Students are available to come back if you have any questions for them. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I come here and every time I hear one of these presentations, I learn so much and I appreciate that.
I would say a good 80% of what you presented tonight will be on your upcoming AP environmental exam. So congratulations for having studied so well for your exam. I'm excited about this. I've had in my when I came to the board, one of the things that I thought about doing was having an impact on sustainability. And water management is one of those things. So I'm delighted to hear that you're looking into it. I'm delighted to hear about how you got into it. 2 years from now, it's not going to be available for when you graduate though. So you're ready to pass that project off to somebody else? Ah. Excellent.
Yeah, there's enough sophomore, freshmen to carry the torch.
I also want to applaud Dr. Khan for connecting the students with such great people in the community, the mentors that they talked about. I think that really brings projects like this to life when teachers are able to not only share their own expertise, but connect students with experts who are practicing in the field. So thank you so much for allowing that for our students.
That was amazing. As a mom of a LHS grad who is now a geologist who focuses on water quality and sustainability, I am duly impressed by all of you. And I hope some of you find career paths out of this.
Well, I want to thank you for the see if I'm on.
It's on.
Thank you for educating me in the status of the community I've raised my family in for 18 years and was unaware of how kind of dire it is. So just practically, what are our next steps? I know you said that we would need to agree with you in August. We would have to approve a plan for an August grant, but prior to that, what would our practical next step be?
Right? Is the agreement part of?
No, the next part of the agreement is on the shoreline. So this was a separate piece on parking.
We would need to decide what exactly we're doing with the parking lot and figure out, wow, I'm on camera. And figure out where we're doing, if we can do the experimental way and if we can make that part of our curriculum.
So Butler Lake is considered an impaired wetland because of its levels of phosphorus and suspended solids. This is partly because of all of the runoff that we have going into the water. So when making a plan to submit in August, we would want to consider what we can do in our plan to address what makes the Butler Lake an impaired wetland, because that will be a key part of getting the grants from the EPA to pay for these projects.
I think one other thing we could do is work and make sure you understand when the summer committee meetings are. So we meet twice in June, a committee meeting and a board meeting, and then only once in July. So if it does need to get turned in by August 1st, we would want to make sure we have connections with your team and knowing what we might need to sign off on to support your work.
I think we only meet once in June, don't we? Yeah.
Once in June,
Once in June, once in July.
Does a grant application require a commitment for the other 40% of funding?
Yes.
And do we have any idea what that funding cost is? Permeable parking lots are way more expensive than regular parking lots.
Yeah, that's the catch, right? So first to decide on a focus for how we want to approach, working I think the first step would be working with a civil engineering company in order to gain an understanding of what it is that our project goals can be and what's reasonable. So really what our full plate of options are, which we got a good taste for what we could do. And I'm excited about those prospects, but we would need to narrow the focus in order not only to have a plan to submit, but then to get pre-approval on all of the levels that we'd have to deal with, especially being a wetland. Now we have to involve the Army Corps of Engineers in terms of pre-approving any work that we would do that would impact the wetlands. So we'd have to get clearance from stormwater management. And what we've learned through working on the Butler Lake shoreline will certainly help us facilitate moving that more quickly, because we know that when we think we're done, we're not done. And when we think we've talked to everybody, no, we haven't. So, but yeah, once we narrow the focus and the scope of the project, it's that meeting with the civil engineering firm and working with the EPA and then also with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Something else, and this is as much a question for Dan as anything, is where is the parking lot on the list and on the priority? Is it coming due for replacement? Is it, where are we on that?
Yeah, the north parking lot LHS is on the list about 2 years
Okay.
scheduled. So it something like that could
Right.
marry really well with that timing.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of times we hear a lot of great ideas, but it might be a great idea on something that we just built. And it's like, well, we have to kind of wait until it's really time to replace to look at it. So this could be a great opportunity for that, especially if, I don't know, let's say the project costs twice as much to do that. Well, if the grant will pay 60% of it, that's
Yeah,
essentially
makes a
cost
lot of
neutral
sense.
for us too. So like, you know, I think there's a lot of possibilities here. So I'm intrigued to find out more. So there, you know, I probably would have a few questions in terms of the timing in terms of what needs to happen for August 1st, but just in terms of like knowing there's kind of a longer plan, a longer process you have to go through to get something like this approved and whatever. I'd be curious to know more about that. But in terms of answering your question, it would line up.
If it's fine, it lines up nicely.
I would also like to point out that the water has eroded under the parking lot in several areas. So it is due for repavement,
Mhm.
and a lot of the avenues that we've used for our shoreline restoration, we can also use for getting grants for this project.
Yeah, and just so people understand, my question was more about to answer Don's question about the financial aspect. Are we planning to do this anyway? So Dan, you know, very clearly states, yes, we're planning to do this. So the funding is already sort of in our mind to do the parking lot anyway. And if we can get the grant to help offset the additional cost of doing, you know, a new and improved, more eco-friendly parking lot, that's even better. I think my comment and concern would be the timing on this in terms of getting you enough information to be able to submit that proposal. I think we would need to get our architect involved. They have access to, you know, all the civil engineers and whatnot and estimates. You know, it depends on how deep or how detailed a proposal we need for that August 1st, but you know, time's a ticking, and you wouldn't get approval for the project from the EPA, not from the EPA, but from the civil engineers and stuff, and from the local village. And in that period of time, it would take much longer than that. But in order to get an estimate to present the proposal for the grant, I think, you know, if we move quick enough, we might be able to get there.
Mark, are you familiar with the process of putting in a permeable parking lot?
Excuse me, a little close. I have not been involved in it. They did one after I left District 113, they did Walters Field, which was, you know, floodplain there. It's gonna be a long process with, first we have to get engineering involved. The water table is the big issue of where the parking lot is right now compared to the normal lake level. So that is our first hurdle to get over. After that, it's, you know, once you do the engineering, the Army Corps of Engineers is a long-term process, could take up to 2 years to get things approved. So they're gonna, we get our engineers involved, can work with the group, and see what the options are, and move forward from there. So my recommendation would be to, get our engineers involved, start the study. We already have our topos. We know that 100-year floodplain runs right up to the building. And obviously the parking lot is in that floodplain. So it's a very delicate situation doing construction in a floodplain.
I just want to add that we've partnered with mentors in all the right places. So, and people want to help kids. That's something that we've seen a lot as a theme through the different projects that we've done as a club. So, even the Stormwater Management Commission in Lake County, 2 of their members are mentors. Having these civil engineers on board who have been helping us as well. We have a contact who's been helping us from the Army Corps of Engineers. So I'm thinking that is going to help us ultimately speed up some of the processes that would normally bog down projects.
Yeah,
So from
which is great. I guess what do we even need to take action or just have a consensus to continue moving forward? I guess if we need to get architects or engineers that we're currently involved with that would cost some amount of money, but I don't know that we even need formal board approval to do that first step.
Yeah, it sounds like formal board approval might come when we're submitting whoever
Mhm.
giving direction for someone to sign the grant. And it sounds like we're open to that and supportive of that. So I think our message to you is excellent work. Yes, we want to support the work you're doing. Keep in touch knowing we have limited meetings over the summer. And that if your mentors can maybe connect with our engineers, we can probably assist in making sure we have everything we need before the August deadline.
And I'd like to end with, thank you. And our community thanks you all for bringing us an option that's going to make this possibly not cost prohibitive, that I don't know that we would have known without your work. So you've really done a service to the whole community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've all already gained so much from this process. I can't wait to see what the, how it moves forward. So thanks. Anybody else?
This is Sonal. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, so now is here.
Yes,
We'll hear from
I just wanted to say that this entire presentation was inspiring at multiple levels. Learned a lot, and Ms. Khan, I think you're an inspirational teacher. And it was really excellent to hear all the students. You all sound really passionate about what you're doing. So I'd say you all make us proud. So that's all I was going to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thanks again for coming out and a very fine presentation. Okay. Next on the agenda for discussion, intergovernmental agreement for Butler Lake with the Village of Libertyville.
Yeah, so the background on this is we already have an intergovernmental agreement for Butler Lake with the Village of Libertyville, and that was so that we could utilize the shoreline to put in a pier in Butler Lake. And so now we are going back to the village because of ECOS and their work that they're doing on that shoreline. And it was in their presentation about the work of the shoreline that they want to do on our side of Butler Lake. And so in order, a couple things for us to be able to have permission to work on that shoreline, also to get some grant money for that project, that we needed the support of the Village of Libertyville. And one of that pieces is to revise our intergovernmental agreement. So thanks to Dr. Khan and her back work on, I think working on the grant, getting the some of the wording for the intergovernment agreement and the work that we're doing, the scope of the work, and working with the Village of Libertyville so that both the Village of Libertyville and us could support this intergovernmental agreement. So what you have in front of you is a support letter from the Village of Libertyville, and then our current Butler Lake intergovernmental agreement. The red is changes. There's some red that's also red and then crossed out red, and that was from our attorney to their attorney. So I kind of wanted to show that piece of it, but you'll see, so you see the red lines, and the red is added from our Butler Lake agreement. So it's really a whole new agreement. And then the village has tentatively, approved this, and they are going to approve it at their April 25th meeting. And our recommendation is for us to approve it at the April 24th meeting. So timing wise, we're approving on the same days, and there's no objections from the Village of Libertyville. We were all already able to send in that we were working on the IGA and sent in the support letter to get the grant. So we did that right before spring break.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments?
Well, we always appreciate the Village of Libertyville's willingness to work with us as partners.
I have a question. Item number 2 on the agreement itself says beginning with the 2023-24 school year, the village consents to the school district's placement of a floating pier on the north side of the lake.
But we still haven't put a pier in yet, so we wanted to change that year to reflect that. But we can go back and you think we should have it?
No,
stay
my
there?
question's not about the year. My
Oh.
question is about the placement, because it says Exhibit A and there isn't actually any depiction on Exhibit A where the pier is going to be.
Yeah,
That's
that was
first.
from
And
the-
second, on the north side, do we really want it on
Should
the
be,
north side?
should be on the south side.
Okay, so I would recommend that we
Alright.
change that to
Okay.
say south side.
Do that.
Good catch.
We must have approved that already with that language, but
Yeah, we probably-
I'll get it fixed.
We probably did.
One more red strike through.
Yeah. Any other? You notice when I said any questions or comments, I looked first at Don because he's our science guy.
Label. No, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's my wheelhouse.
Okay. We will see that on the agenda towards the end of the month at our board meeting.
They're also going to the village. Are you presenting at the village on the 25th too? And so that our club will also be presenting at the village board meeting on the 25th.
That's good to know.
Is that the same night as our meeting?
It's the next
Next
night.
night.
We're the 24th.
Oh,
we're
right,
the
right.
25th.
Okay. Anything else? Moving on. Next item, B on the for discussion list is high expectations for student achievement.
And I'll ask Dan to pull up that PowerPoint slide. There's a couple slides where it might be easier for me to be able to point some stuff out, so I'll just go ahead and present from over here. Oh, do you mind doing for me? Awesome. Thank you, sir. Good evening. I have the wonderful pleasure of getting to share with the board and with the guests in the audience an update for us on maintaining high expectations for student achievement. This is something that we have been working on as part of our strategic plan and as part of our administrative work to get ready for some of these state law changes. But it's important that as all of these things are coming together, we communicate them succinctly so the board knows the path forward. This is also really important because it's something that the teachers union expressed concerns on. And so we said that we would very clearly articulate back what we're doing and to acknowledge that we hear people's concerns and that we want to let everyone know how these issues are moving forward. So this is one of the things that the school board, that the union asked the school board to present some more information. Next slide. So when the teachers union talked about wanting to have high expectations for all students, that is a universal desire between the board, the administration, the parents, and the Illinois State Board of Education. That is one of our charges from the state board, is to ensure that all students are proficient or exemplary in state standards. and that our main accountability measure is from the SAT tests that juniors take junior year. But we also give parents other evidence of that along the way in terms of course grades and other things like that, the PSAT that students take. So we do have ways of ensuring that we're monitoring student progress and meeting this particular goal that all students, hopefully that's not a fire alarm. Little chirp there. Did anyone else hear a chirp?
Those power.
Yeah, little power.
All right, little power surge. All right, so just so you know, that is a universal request. All students achieving at high levels. Next slide. So one of the things that is a newly published document, and I put this up here because it is what you'll see if you go to the Illinois State Board accountability page and learning target page. This is something that ISBE designed to help districts like ours understand what the pace of improvement might be so that all students, and by all, the state has defined that as 90%. They did build in some cushion there. So you'll see at the bottom in 2033, which is 10 years from now, the expectation from the state is that we as educators and systems would make adjustments so that all students, regardless of their subgroups, would be achieving proficient or exemplary at the level of 90%. You can see that for some of our students, actually, all right now, it's at 28.09. We have over 60% of our students. So for all of our students, we're way ahead. But you'll see that by 28, 29, we will need to have shown some improvement in all students to be catching up to what those expectations are. And you'll see that for some of our subgroups, when I go into the data next, we're very close right now to the minimum standards, and we have to show improvements. Again, not only for those students and their well-being as learners, but also this is the targets that were set for us for our accountability measures. Next slide. This is the scores are percent proficient or advanced on the 11th grade assessment, the SAT. No, sorry. This is the state targets. Right. I'm going to show you our current data in just a minute. But I think it's important to know when I say all students achieving at high levels is a universal expectation. It is. It's for the teachers. It's for the state of Illinois. It's for the board. And this is one of our external measures that we need to be paying attention to. We have the same exact table available in ELA. And so again, we see that right now, the all in 2023 will be 37%. Again, we are over 60%. So for all of our students, we are doing well. We're surpassing what the state would say is our target. But again, for some of our subgroups, we are right there at the limit. And so we are going to need to adjust some things to make sure all of our students are meeting these targets. And you'll see that they show gradual change. So they're not expecting it in 1 year to go from 23% to 90% achievement. But they are showing us how we'll be needing to invest in the kind of teaching and learning and resources that will help all students reach these levels. Next slide. So how are our students doing? Overall, again, we see our ELA proficiency and our math proficiency on those top two. And you'll see that overall, our district average of 60.8 and 60.4% is way above the targets. And again, it's a majority of our students are doing that. So I want to celebrate that success. We continue to have high achieving students in our district. The issue is when we look at some of the subgroups that we're now being held accountable to, we don't see that same level of success. So we see, for example, in ELA, the proficiency of 13.3% for our African-American students in both, and our Hispanic students, 36% and 35%. So you'll see that we have when we say the achievement gap, this is what we would be referring to. What we see for all students, and are there some subgroups who right now are performing at lower levels than our all groups? And the answer is yes. Okay. We also see that we have very high graduation rates. So again, another huge celebration. but some of our graduation rates are a little lower for some of our subgroup populations. And again, chronic absenteeism, I just put that up there because I know there was a very large article in the Tribune a few weekends ago about New Trier's problem with chronic absenteeism. And this is going to be on our school report card as a measured factor next year. So it's something we're going to have to keep paying more and more attention to. Next slide. So we know that we have a gap. We also know that we have teachers and students and parents who want their child to be successful. Students want to be successful. And one of the quotes that I always like to come back to is when we find out that there is something not working right in our system, it's the system. It is not saying, oh, the individual teachers who are teaching these or the individual parents who are raising them. It's looking at what in our system can we adjust to make sure that all students are reaching that 90% target that we have in 10 years. And so I'm a huge Deming fan. And I think that when we talk about systems, it's not bureaucratic and it's not business-like. We are a school system. And when we operate as a system, it means that we have things in place that can support individual components, individual deans, individual counselors, individual teachers. And so you'll see some of the things that we're going to be looking at to make sure we're on that path to making to make sure every student is reaching 90% in 10 years. Next slide. So one of the things that we learned when we did our deep dive in data last year for the strategic plan was that students who are in our Striving Learners courses are scoring significantly lower on that 11th grade test. Again, not to say individual teachers, not to say no blame, but to say, what could we learn more about that particular course sequence? And is that something systemically we can adjust? Yeah. Yes, thank you. And please interrupt.
Be very clear, when we don't have anything saying striving learner in our course curriculum guide, but we have co-taught and team taught. So when you are talking about striving learners, are you talking about both? One?
I have that defined next, but I'm but that's okay. Absolutely. I think it's important if it came to you on this slide, then I can go ahead. What we categorize our striving learners courses would be our team taught sections, as well as some of the courses that come after that, like intermediate geometry, where we've designed it to not be the full geometry class. Still a good portion, still a rigorous course, but it's something that is designed to be a little less content than what the other course option might be. Okay, thank you for that. So let's go to the next slide. And here is thank you. I should have went to the next slide beforehand. So we really, right now, if you looked in our course offering book, we have 3 different levels of courses. We have all of our accelerated courses, and that would be advanced placement, dual credit, honors, some of our capstone courses. And again, we encourage open enrollment in those. We want students to be successful, but we do encourage students who want to try a more rigorous course to be able to do so. Under our college prep umbrella, we do have different sections of the course. And I think that's what you're referring to. Sometimes a student might see geometry. A student might see geometry CT, which is co-taught. And how we define that here is where we have one math teacher and one special education teacher, and they co-plan and they co-design it. The other thing that is important about that is, and you'll see the next requirement, for that to be considered a general education environment for those students, it has to have no more than 30% students with IEPs.
My understanding is co-taught also is the same scope and sequence as the college prep.
Yes, yes. We have some common assessments and other things like that. Absolutely. But some parents or students might see on their schedule geometry team taught. That would be with two math teachers who collaborate, who are both present in the classroom to try and support the students. So this is This is a huge investment that the district has been making to try and support these learners. So, when we looked at the achievement gap, it wasn't that District 128 has not been investing teacher time, teacher energy, resources into trying to help all students be proficient. I want to make sure everyone is clear on that. We have done a lot of work. Our results are still showing, though, that students are behind. So the next slide. So again, here was the teacher support and the student composition. So in our geometry classes, they would have 25 students. So that's our general college prep optimum class size. In our geometry co-taught, again, those two teachers, and we have 25 students again with no more than 30% special ed. Same assessments and might have some differentiated approaches, might have some more stations. Actually, some really amazing instruction happens in those classes. When we go to our geometry team taught, this is where it would be our striving learners, and where we have 25 students with 2 math teachers, because it's not necessarily where those students are receiving their IEP minutes, but it is where they are placed for learning geometry. And that is where we do have sections where it exceeds 30% students with IEPs.
And when we say 30%, IEPs only, not 504s, right?
Correct.
Just IEPs.
Correct.
May exceed means it's okay to exceed 30%, or it may happen.
May happen, not may. And so I'm going to go to law next.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, and I'll show you our data. So next slide. So here would be, we were trying to say, okay, we know individual teachers are working very, very hard to try and help these students be successful. But when we look at the outcomes, this would be the percent of students for this last April's assessment. So what we're going to be taking this week, actually, the SAT exam for students who had that particular coursework their sophomore year. So we were trying to, again, because these are students who've had 3 years of math and or 3 years of English. And so we were trying to say, is there a difference for students who take these different pathways of courses? So you'll see over here for the striving learner, and here the striving learner, we did separate it from the team taught because the striving learner would be the courses where you might not have 2 teachers, but we've designed the course to be not as much content. So the informal geometry would be an example of that. So what we did is we looked at the percent of students who'd come through our program in each of those pathways and saw that there is some discrepancies in student success. So students working hard, teachers working hard, we're still seeing that gap here. So when we are looking at this, we see in college prep, we have all 4. We have in our college prep right now, we have kids who are exceeding, we have kids who are meeting, we do have kids who are partially or approaching, and some students who are partially meeting. We'll see that we have that composition in all of them. It's just as we go to the concentration of students who have more significant needs, we are not seeing that having 2 teachers in the classroom is quite enough to change the learning outcomes for the students.
I love that we're actually talking about this. So I'm very excited. I'm sorry I have a lot of questions, but I've been asked a lot of questions, and this is a time for us to kind of
yes, this is the time.
debunk all of this. Has anybody looked in the co-taught to see if achievement for students without IEPs is more reflective of college prep, or has that also affected that level of success?
We have not drilled down that far.
Okay.
That's an excellent question, though. I know that we obviously see that in college prep and co-taught, there's a slight difference, but we have all, but that is sometimes because we're still working to close the achievement gap of students with IEPs.
Right.
So
No, I understand.
we definitely, that would be our next research question in looking at our data. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so, and this is in English, and you'll see the next slide, please. Very similar pattern in math, where we see the in-program, and in-program, again, just to remind people, we have some of our sections that are taught by special education teachers. So it's in-program, meaning the English curriculum is delivered by a special education teacher to a group of students who are only special education students. So in program is one of the ways that we call that. And that's for students who have significant needs. And we will always have a few of those. But it's important for you to note that 10 years ago, we had a lot more students in our in program. And over the last 10 years, because of the least restrictive environment laws and because we believe in inclusion, we've been having more and more students learn their English 9 or learn their Algebra 1 or their geometry with their grade level peers in co-taught. And so we've been on this journey once before, and right now we know that, and we invested in the last 18 months actually in additional training for those teachers. So we know with the right professional learning, with support, students can be successful in that environment. Next slide. Again, one other thing that we are concerned about is when we look at the composition of these classes, because we're like, well, who's in these striving learner classes? And you'll see that it's disproportionate to our African-American and Black students or our Hispanic students. So when we go back and we look at that initial who's not achieving on the SAT, this is almost a mirror image of that population. Okay, so we would want to make sure that in meeting the goal for all of these students to be achieving at high levels, that all of these students are going to need to be instructed using grade level curriculum.
But in this graph, you're saying striving learners is connecting all of them, co-taught, team taught, and the possible 18 with one teacher? Because you don't have it separated anymore.
So this would be saying that the total enrollment, let's see, let's
Who is
use
in
our white
striving
students.
learners? So
right,
our striving learners are, when we say
the green.
the green striving learners are learners who are in either co-taught, team taught, or the striving learner thread. Okay, because now we're combining them. Right. No, I understand that.
That's where the disproportion. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that Kara, you were asking about is it's one of the guidelines from the state of Illinois for delivering services to students with IEPs is the 70-30 rule. And that's where I said we are very clear when we're designing that co-taught section, where that's the place where students will be receiving their IEP minutes. So for those of you who know case management and know some of that, but we also have students who struggle or students who that's not where they're receiving their special ed minutes. And those students are placed into sometimes team taught classes. So they're not getting their IEP minutes because it's 2 math teachers. They're getting that somewhere else. But they are getting good instruction. It's just, there might be, again, like the informal geometry, a little less content and a little less rigor. Okay. So co-taught classes, we do hold ourselves accountable for. We have to submit data for those to the state of Illinois. Our team taught classes, we have not, because that's not where they're delivering their services. So next slide, you'll see that our data does show that. So in the fall, we ran our numbers and we saw that at both schools, again, the green would be the sections, I'm sorry, the team taught and others didn't go on here. So for example, the earth science 11% versus the earth science 46% at Vernon Hills, that would be the difference between the college prep and the team taught. And so the 46% would be students with IEPs. So we know that when we turn our data into the state of Illinois for our co-taught sections, we do meet that threshold of the 70-30 rule. Right now, we would not be in compliance. And again, that's not by design. It's not like we tried to design the system that way. It's just that's where we are right now.
In team taught.
In team taught, yes.
They're not getting their IEP minutes there, which is why.
But it's right, which is why we don't have to report it that way, but it's still
right.
The spirit of this law is to try and make sure that every student has a classroom environment that is getting them ready to be successful post-secondary. And they know that when we put a high concentration of students who have needs into a class, it's very difficult for the teacher to meet that outcome. So next slide. One of the things that I also learned about this fall, again, I work hard to try and network with other area superintendents so we can learn from one another. And the superintendent at Highland Park Deerfield let me know that last year, someone sent in information to ISB that said they were violating the 70-30 rule. And they were, just how we are, not by design, not intentionally, but just by circumstance. So they were given 1 year to put a plan together to fix the situation. No options. So this coming fall, this year has been their design year. Fall, they will start with all of their 9th grade classes. The following year, all of their 10th grade classes. And actually they're going to see it either 10th and 11th or just 10th. They're going to see how the first goes with 9th grade. But other districts around us who have also unintentionally been violating the 70-30 rule are also going to need to be making this adjustment. So, the quote from Maya Angelou, now that we know better, we're going to do better.
So for inquiring minds who want to know, is every district in violation of the 70-30 code given a year to ameliorate what's going on, number one, and number two, if things aren't brought into code within that year, what is the consequence? I think it's important that all stakeholders understand why there are implications outside of not giving our students the best possible education. What are the consequences districts are held to?
I'm going to look over at Aman, who is my guru in student services and special education. I want to, I guess, before I turn it over to her, I think this is a moral imperative that we need to do this because it's right for kids.
Absolutely.
There are other external things that how we place our students, and we have certain targets according to our IDEA grant and some other things of which we have to meet certain least restrictive environments. So I will turn it over to my guru to explain some of those things.
All right, so good evening, everyone. So to answer your question, I want to just take a quick step back in regards to looking at our students that receive services. The overall goal, especially when we get to the high school level, is to make sure that they have some exposure and some experience in the general education population. Because of course, as you know, once they graduate and they leave from us, they are in the real world and there's no such thing as special ed supports with the exception of accommodations. And so one of the things that we are charged with all of our SPED students is to make sure that we're doing some progress monitoring to make sure that they are placed in the least restrictive environment. So with the 730 rule, one of the implications is twofold. One has to do with the student, the other has to do with the teacher. The reason why this code was put into effect was to ensure that the teachers in the room for all of our general education programming. So not just for co-taught, not just for college prep, but even in circumstances such as AP and honors, that anytime that you had students with services that's over that 30%, that we as administration are ensuring that teachers have the supports, they have the time to handle the students in the classroom, because again, they're coming with IEPs. Each IEP is individualized with very specific needs and supports. And so understanding what some of our students come into the classroom with, we want to make sure that we that is acknowledged and that we are making sure that our teachers have what they need in support. The other flip side to that is to make sure that the students have received the supports from the teachers. And so if there's over 50% of your classroom with students with special needs, then there's no way that teachers can do what they need to do in those classrooms. So that was specifically why the 70-30 rule was put into place, because what was happening is that was also when the inclusion bandwagon was, happening, and what was going on was that people were just throwing special ed students in the classroom and saying, yep, they're in the general education classroom. So we want to make sure that that does not happen. But also making sure that we are doing our due diligence in monitoring the progress of our students and not just leaving them in what's said classrooms, such as team taught or striving learners, but we are building upon their expectations, because we know that part of a student's learning is not only the content in which they receive, but then also too the expectations, how we are including the students in the classroom, but also making sure that we also gently push the students towards what they can be possibly capable of.
But I think
Thank
Kara
you.
was asking about compliance. If we are out of compliance, what are the consequences for being out of compliance? If we are found to be
Yes.
not in compliance with 730, what are the consequences?
So usually when we're out of compliance, what happens is that the state will send us a letter. And then we would have said 30, 60 days to provide a response to the state on how we won't be in, that we will address that 70-30 in our classrooms. One of the things that occurs as well too before that letter is sent out is that as we are looking at our enrollment in our classrooms, if there is a class that for whatever reason we can't make sure that it's within that 30% compliance, we can also provide a waiver to the state. And the waiver has two parts to it. One part is filled out by administration, where we say what we're going to do, how we're going to, what we have done to rectify it. And then the other part of that waiver goes to our teachers, and they are asked questions such as, what are supports that you would need? Have you been in communication with your administration? And they also have to sign off on it. Those forms are sent to the state, and then the state sends us a report back, letting us know that those approvals have been done. So it's really the state understanding that the LEAs may not always be in that 70-30, but that we are making sure that we are aware of what's going on and that we're constantly taking a look at it.
But those waivers are designed for one-offs. It's
Absolutely.
not how your system.
Yes,
is
not for the
designed.
entire system. Absolutely.
Okay, next slide, please. One other important thing driving this particular work is our own strategic plan. In the summer, we adopted the goal that we will ensure equitable opportunities and outcomes for all student populations. In the fall, we designed our action plans, and one of the strands is about systems, to make sure that systemic improvements in policies, processes, procedures, initiatives, decision-making, and fiscal matters, that any of those things we need to be reviewing using an equity lens. This would be one of those things, how we place students. And one of the objectives that the committee set forth was to audit and revise the course recommendation process, because we knew that another law that impacts this particular work is coming down the pipe, and that we felt we could do better in this area. So the next slide shows the other law that is sort of a boundary for how we can approach this work, and it is the Advanced Placement Act. And that was signed into law a few years ago, and it was supposed to be implemented this last fall, but we were given an additional year because of COVID and the complexity of this. This is a complex task that we're doing, but it's generally saying that we need to be using nationally learned data to automatically enroll any student who is proficient or advanced in the next highest level course. The parents can and students can then say, no, thanks, I don't want to be in that AP class. But across the whole state, this is one of the things that they're saying will help more students, more underrepresented students, have a seat at the table in honors and AP classes. So currently, we use teacher recommendation and we use grades, but we aren't using any nationally normed data currently to make our placement recommendations. So we have a team of department chairs and assistant principals who are working right now to make sure we understand this law and to put together some drafts. And we will be asking for teacher input on this because we will be needing to use that PSAT that I talked about, where we've just used it as a progress monitor. It will be one of the things we now use for placement recommendations, but we don't want it to be just one test. So we will also, this spring, the team will be looking at what additional nationally normed measures might we use that would inform parents and students in the placement process. You have to approve the policy before June 30th, and we have to start using that new policy starting next fall. So the timeline of this is very good. I mean, us taking a deep data dive, knowing this is coming. So even though it's like a confluence, we're going to maximize our opportunity here and try and approach all of these issues with one adjustment that we need to make. So next slide. And again, going back to that, those were all of the laws and other things. But again, knowing our conversations that we have about equity and how much we believe that every student can learn at high levels, I also see this as just the right thing to do. Next slide. So our recommendation is that we will ensure that all students have access to grade level instruction by removing those striving learner level courses. We will make sure all students are placed in college prep or accelerated courses. We would definitely provide the supports to teachers so they know. Again, we have that already going on in our college prep. They're teaching all 4 levels, but we want to make sure that they're prepared to deliver that same quality of instruction with a few more students who have some gaps in their prior knowledge. We also would want to provide students with additional resources to make sure not just the classroom teacher is going to be able to meet the needs that all of our students have. Next slide. So when I showed the slide before, this is what we are talking about. It would be continuing all of our advanced level courses. So there would not be any changes to that. There might be some more students who are proficient or advanced who we haven't identified, but who the state test might identify and who would be placed over there. But our real approach here is taking the courses where we've seen that student success is lower and raising that floor. We're not going to lower the ceiling. We're not lowering our expectations. We are rising expectations for the students who currently haven't been as successful at grade level content. Next slide. So what do we need to do this? This is an example of one of the things, clear communication about our current practice and all of the whys of why we need to move forward with this change. Identifying high quality professional learning. There are many school districts in the area who are in the same place or who are several years ahead of us. So we can learn from our peers who have already eliminated their remedial or striving level courses. So networking with other districts and exploring, the professional mindset that we all have. I mean, I am confident that our teachers are not going to have the attitude, fine, put them in my class, they'll fail. That is not what D128 teachers are about. D128 teachers are about, great, I need this support and this support and this support, and then any kid in my class can learn at high levels. And so that's what we're going to be approaching this next year and a half with. So next slide. So here you'll see our roadmap. And this, we did borrow some of the anchors from our neighbors to the east, 113. And here's where we've identified this as a need. We have 2 laws that say we need to do this, and it's good for our students who currently aren't achieving at high levels. In the summer, you'll adjust our placement policy. And then in the fall, we will do some site visits to other schools who have successfully implemented this. And again, we have successfully done this once already, by moving our special ed students who were in program. They're successful learners now in our general education courses. So that's one thing. We have a group of teachers who've navigated this journey. We also have another group of teachers who right now deliver all of their courses with heterogeneous classes, and that would be all our elective teachers. So we have a lot of experts on how to do this well on our own staff. We would then spend the fall and the spring making sure that we are increasing the amount of offerings that our instructional coaches, the ICs up there are instructional coaches. So we have 4 instructional coaches at each building, plus department chairs, plus assistant principals. We will make sure that everyone who has wisdom on this will be making sure teachers have access to that. We would then implement for 9th grade, no remedial classes. I'm also I'm in touch with all of our feeder districts who are working on saying, we will do whatever you need to be able to have access to the kind of data for this placement. The other thing that they reminded me is they don't have striving learner classes. In 8th grade, they're either, and most don't even have honors. They have a few honors, but they're all coming from the same classes. So they keep reminding me it's going to be okay. They are learning together in 8th grade. This is something that we sort of create when we sort them into those different categories. So then we would, in the fall and spring, start to get people ready for our 10th grade courses, whatever adjustments we would need to make there. And then that fall of 25 would be 10th grade. And we would repeat that model and probably the 11th and 12th grade classes, because we do have fewer of them at that level. So that would be our recommendation. Our administrative team has been learning a lot about this spring. We've had several of our all admins where we've taken a deep dive to understand these laws, to understand our own data. So now we're going to be moving forward with this. It's not that we have a choice, but we have a choice to how we're doing it. So the next slide. So I just wanted to summarize, we have both internal reasons. You know, we always say we want to know the why. Why are we doing this? We have a series of very important internal. We have our strategic plan that says we want to make sure all of our systems are operating within an equity lens. We have a racial equity policy that talks about this particular thing too, students having access to grade level curriculum. We saw the disproportional enrollment. We saw the achievement gap. And we also, I didn't put it in this presentation, but we also have some data from our culture climate survey that shows that students in our striving learner and classes they report teachers having a lower expectation of them and their learning. We have external factors. We have those proficiency targets. By 2033, all of our students should be achieving at 90%. And that might seem utopian, but there are school districts who are doing this. I think that's the thing, you know, and ever since the late 90s, there have been 90 schools where 90% of their students are on free and reduced lunch, 90% of their students are minorities, but 90% are reaching grade level standards. So we know it can be done. It's just going to take some adjustments in the system. This is not about blame. Again, the Accelerated Placement Act. And one last thing that we presented on earlier, where we talked about the PWR Act, is the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act. Our next year's incoming freshmen are the first to need to have a pathway ready for them. One of the requirements of them being eligible for the pathway endorsement is that they are college ready in English and college ready in math. So they have to meet that 11th grade proficiency standard. So we want to make sure that we're setting all of our students as they're coming to us to be ready to have that endorsement, that we're not shutting any doors accidentally on them by placing them in classes where we know they might not be successful. So that is all of the things that are talking about how we are going to hold high achievement expectations for all of our students moving forward. I'd love to take questions, as well as lots of people have helped me with this presentation.
I got a few. Or actually, just a general comment first. I have been through something similar. College prep biology, traditionally taught along with basic level biology. When we eliminated the basic level, then that spread. So this is my personal experience. So in order to be sure that you weren't overloading any one teacher, any one section, you had to be sure that you didn't have more than 30% IEPs.
Right.
It's hard. So I really want to emphasize that training and support, because it's work. And I understand that teachers might have some trepidation hearing that all of a sudden the general classroom teacher is going to have 30% IEPs in their classroom. Well, every teacher has students with IEPs, everyone. So it's not like we don't have experience with it. It's just, I think it's more a fear than it is like a practicality. So I'm glad to hear you talking about supports, both for the students and for the teachers. Second, you mentioned the word policy twice, but in terms of placement, we do not currently have a board policy.
We have to have one, then we will be bringing one. We have a team who is authoring it. Yep.
Okay.
I couldn't
so-
remember if we did or not, but it is part of this law is we have to have a placement policy.
Yeah, so press has one. It's 6/135. But yeah, in bold print, I read the law today and it's school district shall have a policy. My question is by when?
We will have it to you, a draft probably at the May meeting, but it will be ready for your approval by June. Yes.
Yeah, because that'll have to be in place July 1 with all the other requirements.
We can do it without a policy, but it would be better to have a
Yes,
policy
we would
before.
like to try and meet that time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a few too. Some of the things that came up in our conversations was, I know you said communicating to all the stakeholders what our policy and placement policy is. And I think one of the themes that came up is if we are going to make PSAT determinative, that the students really need to understand that it's determinative and that we tend to double speak.
Yes.
That the tests don't really matter, but yes, they really do matter. So I think we have to come up with some kind of a balance of how I understand the test is the starting place, but is there more to it to have access? You know, if we have special ed students who don't test well, that still
Yes.
have access. So we want to make sure our policy is not singly determined.
Absolutely. And we have talked with a few districts who piloted their policy this year. So York High School did what we're talking about already this year. And what they did was they used that expectation as the floor, the minimum. And then they had a few other measures that would qualify for additional students to also be placed in standard or honors AP. So what they were saying is, we want to follow the law and make sure we're using nationally normed data to identify students almost on that first tier. But we know for some students, that's not the best metric. So we're going to also look at other measures for placing up. They did not place any students down. Absolutely. So we would definitely have that be part of.
And as you're working on determining this, is teacher voice a part of coming up with this policy?
So I think the team has been working to get a hold of what the state law is. And like at the superintendent's coffee, teachers asked about wanting to have input in this. And I said, absolutely. So we will, the Advanced Placement Act Committee will be like, for example, some teachers are advocating for the STAR test that we already use at some, and it does have nationally normed data, where other teachers are saying, no, we don't like that one. So we need to get teacher input.
Right.
But it might not be the one everybody wants, because we want that to be consistent between both buildings. But we definitely will, when we're looking at measures, make sure teacher voice is a part of that selection process.
And that one more. So we talked about our timeline. What happens if the state comes in and says you're not in compliance, not within our time? I mean, if we are showing that we have a plan in the future to rectify the situation, have we met our burden? I mean, right now, we're not changing anything in our curriculum until 2024. What if we're found to be not in compliance next school year?
one of the things that, like the Girl Scout in me is, and the Maya Angelou quote, once you know better, you do better. I think us saying that to the state, again, 113 didn't have a self-discovery like they did. They were reported. And when they were reported, they still received a year's planning time from the state. So we haven't been reported. We are self-identifying.
So our timeline should be sufficient. That's all.
I think if 113, who was identified and who did receive a non-compliance letter, had this kind of a timeline, I feel comfortable. I mean, they could come in and say, nope, you got to do all of them. But I think that showing the professional learning we're trying to provide, showing all of those things that we're trying to make this change at a pace that is manageable for our staff, I think they will allow it. Again, we are doing this because we know that we could be caught, and that's just not the kind of district, Joe. We're not going to wait to get caught.
No, my question was geared toward, can they make us move faster?
They could. Yes, they could.
And let me also be very clear as well too, is that, and if you're speaking just slowly on the 70-30 rule, I think that there's going to also have to be mechanisms that we're putting into place in making sure that we're monitoring that, in addition to looking at the composition of our classes, because that's going to have to be done, especially as the students are matriculating into those classes, because 70-30 happens with every single class. So the IEP students are going somewhere. So there has to be other mechanisms that we have to implement to make sure that we're staying within those boundaries. I think the most important piece that we will need to focus on is that support for the teachers, because this is going to be very new and it is going to be a shift in culture. And I heard earlier that all teachers have had sped students in the classroom, and that may not necessarily be true. And so I want to make sure that we as an administration, we as a community, provide that wraparound and that PD for our teachers, so that way that they feel confident in providing services to those students.
Right. And it's not just, I mean, I know we're talking about IEP students, but we have a lot of intervention students that are not IEP, right? So, I mean, in a very just kind of global sense, what we're saying is students are going into our college prep coursework. Now, we already have interventions lined up with people and personnel to support students and teachers, whether they're in an IEP student or an intervention student. Right now, our model has been to put all of our intervention / IEP kind of in separate classes. I understand why we're doing that, but where does the support go so that if now a student who is an IEP student or intervention student is now in, and I believe in this, I'm not right. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody understands, as somebody who does this all day long, you
are a reading interventionist. Yes.
Right. The intervention has to go with the student, right? So the fear becomes, I don't have the support. So we have to be crystal clear on, here's the support we're going to
Dan,
supply.
can you go back to the slide that showed the composition of who teaches each of these sections? And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things I wanted to say on this slide. When I talked about the district already investing significant resources into the support of students who currently are not achieving a grade level. Can you go to the next slide beyond this? All right, so when we are looking at our team taught classes, where we currently have 2 teachers, that additional teacher, we will use that teacher as maybe a push-in for that, or an interventionist. This is not an opportunity to cut cost.
Right.
We will be moving that resource so that the students are with their grade level peers, but still get the support that they need.
Right.
So thank you for reminding me to point that out. This is not a cost saving measure. This is making sure that our students are with their peers in learning environments where they have at least 70% of the students who are at grade level, so that it's a heterogeneous group of students, so that the teachers and the students can create that learning environment that has high expectations for
I mean,
everyone.
we have the personnel, it's just going to look
It's
different.
going to look different.
And we also have to have a mechanism to make sure that kids don't fall through the cracks.
Yes.
That's what happens.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm done
Nope.
now.
Thank you. Excellent questions.
Can I add something that, and I think you were asking about the state and corrective action plans. So typically you get like a year to develop your corrective action plan, and they will come back to make sure that you did what you said you were going to do. And if you haven't, they just keep coming back on an annual basis.
Any other questions? Thank you all so much. Very excited for this important work. And like I said, we will be reaching out to our teachers to ask for their input on the APA, meaning the placement, and then also starting with all the 9th grade teachers. What might that look like? What kind of model do we want to design? And they'll have all next year to do that work.
That's exciting.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Language lab update.
Good evening. So tonight with me, I have our world language department chairs, Tammy Black and Jenny Getch. They're going to be co-presenting with me. And we also want to thank our principals, Dr. Gilliam and Dr. Calentis, for being here and supporting us throughout this process. Before we get started, I'd like to just recognize that there was a history and a process in the board agenda and the board packet. That is reflective of the LHS history and process that they engaged in the 2017-18-19 school year, 2017-18 school year. So the 23-24 school year will be a transition year for the Vernon Hills Language Lab. Both departments are going to participate in a process of identifying common comprehensive suite of software and hardware tools that are going to maximize student engagement. Currently, LHS continues the practices that were established during the 2021-2022 school year, and Vernon Hills has a traditional language lab with a lab assistant, a lab supervisor.
So I've been asked to provide a little bit of a historical perspective of how the LHS lab shifted from traditional language lab to iPad lab to doing it all in the classroom. So you can see that in the 2017-2018 school year, the LHS building leadership let us know that we had some funds to envision what that language lab would look like. And using the Actual World Readiness Standards, they're also our state standards, we started to think about our 3 modes of communication: interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive, and what kind of a space will support those standards. So the idea was to improve the functionality of the lab and create opportunities for a variety of experiences supporting the 3 modes. And so Dr. Sanchez has more of the historical perspective in terms of survey the department took about flexible learning spaces. And we had a presentation about what the functions from the traditional lab, what that would look like on an iPad. We were in consult with Dr. Albin during this time, and he and I made the instructional decision to move to iPads. Not only because at that time there was the AP College Board had the DAC app that allowed students to test and the AP language tests directly through that app on the iPad and then upload it directly to College Board, which took some steps out of the traditional lab and collecting the data. Used to have to burn CDs and then they moved to an upload. So he and I made that decision, and we moved in 2018, 2019 to this new lab, which had presentation spaces to support the 3 modes. I'm sorry, the presentational mode. It had tables that were set up for groups of 4 to be able to interact in the interpersonal mode. And then it also had some tables that you could use for interpretive activities. On top of the fact that we had the iPads that would allow us to do a variety of things,
However, during the beginning of that year, we had a really great language lab facilitator who was a tech whiz and had all of the pieces in place. She, unfortunately for us, but fortunately for her, she got offered a job in her master's degree area. So she moved on. And so we were faced with the challenge of hiring someone to replace her. And we did that in the fall of 2018, which, as you might imagine, then required extensive training. And IT did their best to support and help, but it wasn't on their agenda to have to, train someone from the very beginning. And there were other logistical pieces to the iPads that we hadn't known would be an issue. If you have ever worked with students one-on-one on iPads, that's a much different experience and a much easier experience than it is having a class set of iPads that multiple students log in and out of throughout the day. So with that, there were frustrations of loss of time. Students had to have a completely different ID than their login to their Chromebooks, and the whole learning curve was big. So as you might imagine, teachers they prized their classroom time, and many were frustrated that it took too long to get everyone in, and kids forgot passwords and had to be reset. And so during that year, some teachers solely used the lab space for work within the 3 modes that didn't have to do with the iPads. Some others were brave, and some who kind of dipped their toes into Apple Classroom, which allowed teachers to send out and collect back things. We were kind of a mixed bag at that point, which continued into the fall of 2019. And thinking about it, in hindsight, we just needed more training. We needed more job embedded professional development. I fully own that I should have advocated for more support, and, both for the new facilitator and to develop the teachers so that they would be able to run things as well. But then COVID hit, and that story. So from there, when we came back, we were, in e-learning. And then when we came back into hybrid in the fall of 2020, that lab space was used by one of our social studies teachers as a hybrid classroom. There was some space issues, so we weren't able to access that room. And then in the spring of 21 was when the determination was made that it would be an innovation space for all to use. We could certainly still use it, but that the entire school would be able to check it out. And that's kind of how it stood last year, kind of this year, first semester. And then more recently, last month, I had 3 teachers come to me to express concern that what we had been using, and to be quite honest, once we came back in e-learning and then hybrid and then all of last year, teachers were working extremely hard just to get the train moving again, right? And so they were doing everything they could. They were using, the web-based resources they had and staying in the classroom and really trying to get it together. So I was really happy when these 3 teachers reached out last month to say, we feel like this is not getting it. And if we prize interpersonal communication overall, because what do we want our students to be able to do? Interact and speak in the language and understand and interpret. So we had a discussion about their concerns, and I said, here's what we're going to do. We'll check in with the department, and we have yet to have a department meeting since this meeting with these teachers, kind of figure out what is our vision, what are our wants, what are the summary of our concerns, and then let's figure out how we can address those concerns. So that's kind of the short version of how things progressed at LHS. And, we've still had, since 2016, 400 students earn the seal of biliteracy, whether it's through the Apple test, the STAMP test, the ALTA test now, or through AP testing. So we're still doing great things. And I just want to reiterate, this is only an LHS thing. This was not something that was in conjunction with Vernon Hills. And then I was also asked to talk about what do other area schools have. And this is just strictly information that came to us last month when Tammy and I co-hosted the Northwest Suburban Department Chair meeting here at Libertyville. And so those schools in attendance that day gave us their kind of response of whether they had a lab, had they ever had a lab, what do they do instead of the lab? And
I am certain there are more schools in the area that do still have labs. So I don't want this to be taken as a comprehensive of list. It's again, just those that were in attendance at our meeting. Yeah.
So here you see our AP pass rate, and we've had the LHS passing rate for 2022 in French was 100%. And Vernon Hills, it was 86%. The year prior to that, it was 70 and 75%. So there hasn't been a drop in the pass rate at LHS because they no longer have a lab. I do have 5-year data if you guys would like to share that for Spanish and French, since that is the assessment that the AP assessment that kids have taken for the past 5 years. There was a couple of years with a handful of kids took Chinese or German, but there wasn't 5-year data on that. But there hasn't been a significant drop in students passing the AP exam at one of the schools because they no longer have a language lab.
So moving forward, we're going to keep the language lab open for 1 more year, which is great news for us to have time to really pilot and search out the software that's going to best support our students and our staff in those 3 modes of communication. Yesenia, Jenny, and I are going to work together to curate the list this spring and summer. And we will be working with our staff to pilot then those best options that we have out there. This will be a collaborative process involving both departments, all teachers, and we'll be using that collective feedback that we get from them to make our choice. They'll be involved in letting us know what are their must-haves as we're looking through the variety of options out there. It's not a huge list, but there is a list of and a choice that we can make in this process.
So Tammy kind of covered the next steps. So in addition to the ones on the slide, we're also going to work together this summer, Tammy, Jenny, and I, to develop a schedule of dates and times where we're going to bring the departments together to engage in this work.
During the school year?
Yes, not in the summer.
So maybe I missed this. What will LHS be doing then for, they won't have a language lab. What will they be doing while we're going through this process?
They'll be a part of the pilot process with us.
Okay.
So we'll have the functioning lab as it is right now for next year. But all the teachers in our world languages departments will be involved in the piloting process and trying out these pieces.
Okay.
And in fact, Tammy and I have started our piloting one product that we were able to speak with a rep last week, 2 weeks ago. So in my Spanish 1 classes, I've already started piloting one product to kind of see how it goes and what functionality it has. But really, I think the big thing is to find out from the department what their wish list and also must-haves includes, so that then when we search out providers, which they're not a million, but there are several, we can kind of tailor our pilot to those wishes.
So right now in LHS, what's happening is the classroom, the teacher is doing it within their classroom as opposed to having a lab, but yet the technology that we had for them is kind of user unfriendly, so they tend to not use it. So LHS students are not getting those 3 modes of communication.
They still are. We do a lot of practice live in class, and in fact, a lot of the assessment live. Tomorrow, Spanish 1 is doing a virtual speaking live. But many of the teachers use Flipgrid. There are other web-based items we can use, formative to record. And so it's not that they're not doing those things at all. They most certainly still are. It's just not to the level that they would like. And in particular, when you have AP teachers who are trying to emulate the guided conversations and things of the AP exam, they want something that can really mirror that.
So at the end of this process, we're going to have more of a district view and the 2 building view.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. And it's the really cool thing about it is with the web-based lab is that right now at Vernon Hills, teachers bring their students in for 20 minutes once a week. With the web-based lab, they're going to be able to do this at any time throughout the week that they would like to. So they're going to have much more access to this for their students to be able to do it more frequently and plan as the needs come up and arise in their lessons, not simply because this is my day, this is my time frame for it.
Are there teachers at Vernon Hills currently that don't use the lab, that model the work?
Me. I came from 20 plus years of teaching without language labs before I got the job here. So I am a teacher that doesn't use the lab as it is. I prefer to do the in-person, face-to-face communication with my kids and record other ways when I need to. So yeah,
So that's one.
that's one.
Are there more?
No, all the rest of the teachers at Vernon Hills do use the lab, but they only get, like I said, those 20 minutes per week for their student. And this will, for their students, this will allow them to have much more frequent and flexibility in the timing of that use of the web-based lab.
I'm happy to hear the year transition to sort of give you sufficient time. The thing that I've always found in identifying new tools, applications, things for this type of application, you go out and you find the first one that seems to fit and nice and shiny new object, and you grab it and try to rush through and put it in, but to give it some methodical and really do some good comparisons and some good pilots to choose what's best for as many people as we can. I think that's important, and the end result will be much better and much more cohesive. Other questions, comments?
I just want to thank you for the presentation. This was very insightful information and added, I think, some much needed color and context to this conversation. So thank you.
Again, I learned something all the time. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is the textbook adoptions.
I don't know why I moved it back, but let me bring it back. So you do have the textbook adoptions. There are two. There was a question about the LHS one for film and philosophy and why Vernon Hills was not on the list. Vernon Hills adopted this textbook last year, so they've already made the transition to this 4th edition textbook. And the other one that is a singleton is the AP African American Studies class, and that will only be piloted at Vernon Hills next year. And then on next year's textbook adoption, you will see a request for it at LHS, as they will be teaching the class 24-25 school year.
How do the teachers in both buildings get together to decide, say, earth science or environmental science? Is that it? Oh. And then social studies, US government.
So the department chairs work with the departments and the teachers to identify texts they would like to adopt. I think this year world languages is making a shift to something that is going to be more digital. And so, yeah, do you want to share? I mean, you're already here. You want to share some of your process?
So what we put in for is looking at called Education Perfect. It curates the interpretive listenings and readings for us according to the curriculum that we have written. So it's something that we just found out about, and looking at the timelines, we put it in. It is not a textbook per se. It brings up resources that fit along with our curriculum that we wrote.
Yeah, it's like the primary resource for the class, right? Some will have a textbook, some, like we'll have a lot of our literature classes will have more like class sets where they circle through novels, and this would be like the primary resource for world languages. But the department chairs do engage in a process with the teachers to identify.
We're in the beginning stages of it yet, and we haven't done the pilot with our staff on there. This was just the beginning of getting that request started for where we would like to go.
And I think it's comparable to maybe like Math Excel, that kind of an online platform that provides additional practice and skills practice and differentiation. It does, students can write, record, all of the, do all of the things within the three modes. And it also has resources for us. Like she said, we can upload our thematic units, and then the company arranges the materials so that it fits within our units. It has ways to differentiate per student. And the other thing that's nice is course teams can collaborate. So even between our two buildings, our level 1 teams can collaborate and have their own sort of folders of things that they're doing. And it gives us a lot of rich data in terms of formative feedback and progress towards standards. So we haven't piloted it, but we wanted to get it on the list as a resource, so that if our teachers did decide that they really liked it and it would really help them, then we wanted to be able to provide that for them.
So it's not a textbook adoption.
No, it's
It's a unique. Oh, no. Yeah, no, we're trying to find a place where it fit.
we were
Yeah.
told we had to put it on the textbook
Yeah.
adoption list because it is a digital resource. That
So it's just something that's supplemental. It's a
Yes,
resource.
correct.
Can I,
Yeah.
I want to
Yes.
get back to my original question.
Mhm.
So do teams of teachers in separate buildings have an opportunity to meet and talk to each other face to face about a textbook adoption? So did the earth science teachers from Vernon Hills and from LHS meet in a way that they could discuss that? I'm not interested in finding out. Like, it's support material. That's not a textbook adoption.
Yeah, so from my understanding, the department chairs work with the departments. I can come back and find out if they do meet together as a team. I know that if there's, for instance, Savas Learning coming and they're going to look at that textbook, they receive the presentation from the publisher. I'm not sure if they do it together or if they have two separate presentations.
I think that's an area where we need to get the practice and protocols down more
I'm
clearly.
concerned because twice now I've heard the
Right.
department chairs and I haven't heard the voice of the people who are actually doing it.
Right. The other thing is to know, like, philosophy and film. Last year was at one school and this year is in another school. They happen to pick the same one, but I think that is another troubling thing. We need to get our course teams on consistent patterns where they are working together. These are decisions that, it's district dollars we're investing. So we want to make sure that they're collaborating so that the primary resource is consistent between the two schools.
And even that wouldn't necessarily bother me if they chose different resources. Because not all textbooks are perfect for all populations, but they would. I think presenting their arguments for why they would want one particular text over another. But I would be upset if my director handed me a textbook and said, this is what you're using next year. So I would like to know that that's not part of our process.
Yeah, so that is something that we are going to be working on. One of the first steps is we're trying to identify and what is up for cycle, because it's been done by course teams here. And so that is a project that Michelle, Sherry, and Suzanne are going to be working on to help us identify what is coming up in the next few years, because we would like to be able to say, okay, are we going to move more towards department adoptions, and we can engage the whole teams in a curriculum adoption process that looks at something like the equip rubric, and that's what we use. And we look at ed reports when we're looking for our primary resource, and we have a process and procedure in place that we can point to and say, this is how we do it. But we would like to first get a clear picture of what is coming up for cycle, so that we can identify what are the ones that we're going to start working on. But the district does not have, like, I can't give you a procedure that says this is how we do
We
textbook
don't have
adoption.
rubrics or something like that.
We
that
don't.
shows exactly what teacher teams need to be looking at when they're comparing resource A, B, or C. I'm familiar with districts having those also. So again, the decision is among the practitioners, but because it's such a large expense, the whole team collaborates on what should be the questions we're asking and answering so that we have evidence to say this is the absolute best resource.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that struck me that Don said is the idea that we're not, as the board, we're not trying to dictate that process or dictate how you select materials or textbooks or anything else. But what we would like to know that's been done fairly, that's been done with the teacher voice involved, but it's been done in a responsible way. Maybe you know, at least in collaboration to get some ideas, even between the buildings, but not necessarily to have one size fits all either. But I think that's what our interest would be, not to, you know, get involved in that process, but just to know what that process looks like to make sure that it's fair and it's including the teacher voice.
Are any of these new titles or are these continued titles? I mean, I see some of them are new resources. So if it's not a new resource, can I assume that this is a text that they already are using and we're just updating it with the new edition?
Yep, correct.
Okay, so we're not changing resources that they haven't been a part of.
Correct.
That's the other big question.
Huh?
That's the other big question. Like if I all of a sudden found out that I was teaching out of Miller instead of Withcott for AP Environmental, like all my supports are already with that publisher, so I would like to know that.
But this is just continuing what they're already using, just with the new edition.
The ones that are new additions, yes. If they, hold on, let me pull it up.
Well, if you look on the list, there's 3 items on here that say new resource.
Right, those are the.
Right.
Those are the only new ones.
The new ones. So the other ones are continuation of.
Yeah, and so I come from a place where we did it like that. And so we're working on getting there.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that we are working on getting to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, this
Other
is
questions?
Lisa. I had a quick question. Can you hear me?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. So I
Yeah.
agree with your comment, and I appreciate that the board is interested in a process being in place, but doesn't want to dictate what that is. I am wondering, as somebody who's not an educator, is there a legitimate reason that we could be using 2 different materials at Vernon Hills versus Libertyville? Or is the expectation
There's 2
that
people over here that would like to answer that, but I think it's probably better coming from.
I can think of a reason.
Yeah.
What would that be?
Different textbooks for, say, AP Environmental Science have different emphasis. So some of them might be research-based, some of them might be based on storylines, some of them might be based on area. So I would want to select a text that reflects the students that I have in my classroom. So if I get together with my other teachers and we select a text that fits our building, that fits our resources outside, might be that the text is heavy on, say, water management and air pollution, where another text doesn't look at that as much. But because of the particular school that I'm in, I have direct access right outside my classroom. This actually happened. So I had direct access right outside my classroom to the local pond. So everything that I could tie into the pond, I did. Now, we chose a text by Withcott because of the strengths of the way Withcott examined water resources.
But you didn't have a sister school to talk to about
I
that.
didn't have a sister
Right.
school, but if I had a sister school that didn't have the same resource that was directly available to them, they might choose a different text that reflects their physical environment.
so that makes
So
sense.
it's kind of
but
the
my-
way AP.
That makes sense, but I
Go ahead.
think my observation might be that that would be exceptional. And that in most cases, if we're providing similar education opportunities across the district, in most cases, you would use the same materials.
I can tell you, I mean, I've talked about this a lot. I think we have to separate resource from curriculum. Those are 2 separate things. And as long as curriculum is standard and curriculum is what this is the same, I agree, it's probably easier if you can use resources, but just for English, the curriculum is the curriculum. If a teacher chooses different novels to approach that curriculum, because that's something that they're connected to, as long as it meets our standards, you have, I mean, the materials don't always have to align as long as the curriculum aligns. And I think that, so I think there are instances where materials could be different, but curriculum is the same.
Sure, and that makes sense, but I guess, again, the source materials, if you're talking about different novels, that makes sense. But in terms of the textbooks, my expectation is that in most cases, they would be the same materials.
It would be my guess that in most cases,
most
they would be.
Yeah.
Okay,
But,
thank you.
but not, I think the point that I was trying to make earlier, and I think Don, you were trying to make, is we don't want to be so restrictive that we create a policy that says they have to be.
Of course not.
That we recognize that there might be some.
I would never suggest that we should have a policy that dictates that. I was just curious if what the practice, what the expectation of the practice under normal circumstances would be.
Yeah, and this is
In some
Sonal. I was
courses-
kind of
Has something to.
adding a bit more to what you were saying, Lisa, is if they don't have to be the same, then my curiosity would be what factors drive you to be different, and can those factors be consistent? So you're not choosing a completely different set of criteria for each class or each year over year. Has to be some consistency is what I would think. Again, but I'm speaking from a non-educator perspective. My area of work is driving consistency in what we do. So just a thought.
Tom, you wanted to make a comment?
Well, I just wanted, since I'm here and.
Can grab a mic.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify for the board that it is absolutely the expectation that teachers are involved in the review and selection of the textbooks. In fact, many of the teachers drive the adoption process. It's the chairs who write up and submit the proposal in the form, but the expectation is that teachers are involved in that. They're looking at different materials, they're meeting with the vendors, and collectively with the department chair making a recommendation. So when we say we are moving towards that, I think we're there, and that is the expectation for our core texts in our departments across the board.
Tom, are those meetings between both schools?
No, they are not. So we have to remember that they could be, and at times they have been. It depends historically on the chairs and the timing with the departments, and if those would sync up. Now, historically, District 128 has been two individual schools operating in isolation. So there were times when a chair would say, hey, to their colleague, I'm going to look for my teachers are talking about a new AP Psych book. Do your teachers want to look at that? And there might have been collective effort on that. There was no expectation that there would be one decision between the buildings. And there wasn't really always expectation that the teams at each building would meet collectively together. So at times that did happen, at times it didn't. I think what we're moving towards is more of a standard process where at least that discussion between the buildings and between staff at each building is more formalized. But it sounds like from the board's perspective, you do understand that there may be very thoughtful, well-reasoned decisions why each building and each department would select or recommend a different text based on their needs for their students.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. I think that's the answer I was hoping for, looking for.
Yeah, I was just prompted by building both or LHS or Vernon Hills. So if both were adopting, I would expect that there would be a conversation between them. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the textbook adoption? That will come up in the board meeting later in the month for approval. Next on online learning platform, Imagine Learning.
So again, good evening, Board of Education and our D128 community. Today, I would like to bring forth to you Imagine Learning, our Imagine Learning platform. Today with me, I have with me in the room, Mr. Bob Furlan, who is part of the Imagine Learning team. Stand up. Also, we have Anna Gomez. Okay, so she didn't make it today. And then on our screen, we will also have Ms. Kara Wilkinson, who is also part of the Imagine Learning team. So today I am just going to provide a brief history of our utilization of online courses within D128. And then speak about how we arrived at the recommendation for securing the new online platform. And then there'll be a brief presentation from the Imagine Learning presentation. And then I'll talk about next steps. So D128 has been utilizing Imagine Learning. D128 has been using an online platform since about 1617. Throughout the years, we have utilized two platforms. One school has used Illinois Virtual School, and that has been Libertyville High School. And then at our Vernon Hills High School, they use Eduseer. Then there was a moment in time and when we were all shut down, and then that also included the Illinois Virtual School. And so both schools ended up using Eduseer. And then as of this year, Illinois Virtual School has come back as now Illinois Virtual Academy, in which we continue to use at this point in time, and also continuing to use Eduseer. So, flip through. All right. And so for over the years, we have used our online course platforms for several different reasons to provide services for our students. So we've used it for credit recovery. We have also used it for students who've had long-term homebound, which this is when a student is going to be out for 6 or more weeks. Also, we have used it for initial credit. So there have been some cases in which our students have taken the course because they needed a modification in their schedule. We've also utilized this for a catch-up for students who are transferring into the district, who are in need of our graduation requirements. And then last but not least, we have utilized our online platform to support summer school courses as well as initial credit that students were interested in. So so this is the breakdown of how many students have benefited from utilizing our online platform. And so you can see the breakdown by the 2021-2022 school year, last year's summer session, and then where we are at right now. During the 1920 and then 20 to 21 school session, there was very limited usage due to all of us being virtually. However, if we were to look at our numbers from 19, the numbers are significantly more than the numbers that you see before us.
Are these courses or
These
number of
are
students or
number
number of
of
courses
students.
enrolled?
Yeah, these
Number-
are number of students that
Students,
took the,
okay,
yeah.
so they could be enrolled in more than one?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Thank you.
So next, I would like to thank the members of the online learning committee, which consisted of district-wide building administration, district administration, as well as teachers from both buildings. And we were charged to continue to investigate a system that will meet the current needs of our district, but also begin to look at how we can utilize a system that can expand our summer offerings. Also provide instructional options for our EL program. And then last but not least, as we continue to look at those interventions for our students, a system that can provide targeted interventions as well as flexible options to address some of the identified needs of our students. So after So during the course of first semester and then the beginning of second semester, the committee investigated 4 systems, 2 including Eduseer and Illinois Virtual Academy. And then we also looked at the Apex system. And then last but not least, the Imagine Learning system. So this is some of the committee's feedback on the Imagine Learning system that you see before you. And by far, the committee's feedback on this system was where we found the most strengths in all of the areas that we had identified for identifying a new system. So with that being said, I think that it is always beneficial for members of the committee and members of the board to kind of take a look at what the system can provide and provide to our students. So with that being said, I would like to welcome Kara Wilkinson, and she will provide a brief overview of the Imagine Learning system.
Thank you, Iman. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you for allowing me to join you virtually this evening. Again, Kara Wilkinson. I'm the Director of Instructional Services Partnerships, and we're very fortunate. We did have a partnership with Community High School District 128 last summer, in which 8 students took trigonometry with us, utilizing our curriculum that we're going to talk about tonight, and also our teaching services. I'm happy to say I just looked at it. All students did exceptionally well last summer, with the lowest actual grade being an 85% and all of them reaching 100% completion. So that is fantastic. But tonight we're going to keep the focus on our video-based courses, and I really look forward to your questions following. So first and foremost, let's talk about the course options for Illinois. And I'm actually going to get out of here and pull up the course list quickly because we have a lot of wonderful options. And focusing on summer school, which I think is the immediate need, a lot of those students are going to be taking the core courses. What's nice is when you have a core course, like an English course, a math course, the district's going to receive all versions of that course: initial credit, credit recovery, and where it's applicable, honors courses. All of our courses too have semester splits already constructed, or half credit splits. So if a student needs to repeat just that second half of the year and put it in that pre-testing credit recovery mode, they have that ability. Beyond the core, we have world language courses available. We do have AP French and AP Spanish as well. As we scroll down to those AP course options, those are all College Board approved, of course. They must be in order to have that AP designation. We have general electives for students in the middle and high school levels. We too have national test prep, and I'm very grateful to have heard the prior presentations, and I heard about the importance of that SAT, and I did just want to throw that out there that we do have preparatory courses for that as well. We have great social emotional learning courses. We have other electives available, CTE, other subscription-based electives, your health and PE courses. So if anyone would like to take a deeper look at this, we can, of course, provide print copies for you or send you the web links. But we do understand that in the summer, most of the students, again, are going to be either repeating those core courses or maybe trying for acceleration in those core courses with initial credit. Let me pop back over here. So I already mentioned a little bit of those course splits, but I just wanted to go into some further detail. So when the students are in a credit recovery course, the course is already shortened a little bit, and there is a pre-test at the beginning, so students have the opportunity to master out of lessons they already understand. Rather than giving students a giant diagnostic, we break it up into lesson-based tests. Students, the way the default setting is, need to get 8 out of the 10 questions correct in order to place out. What's nice about the content and some of the back-end settings, they are customizable to meet your district's needs. So if you wanted to make it 7 out of 10 questions correct or 6 out of 10 questions correct to place out, you can do that. And that's especially important for students that do have individualized learning plans. And we'll get into that more in a little bit. But again, when students are in that credit recovery course, it's shortened. They take that pre-test. There's limited teacher grading, which is very nice over the summer. And you'll see the 40 hours per semester. That's if you take the course without mastering out of anything. By the time the students take that pre-test, The course could be 30 hours of work, 20 hours of work. It depends on the information they already obtained. When you look at an initial credit course, that is, of course, the full version, meeting all the standards. And I know standards obviously going to be a big point of conversation. We can send you the standards alignments for Illinois. All of our core curriculum absolutely is aligned. And we have some other wonderful partners across the state. And in order to do that, of course, we need to be aligned to Illinois. The initial credit courses do have more that needs to be teacher graded. I would say it's about 30% teacher graded work, and you'll see the time here about 50 hours to complete that half credit. For the honors versions of the courses, those have additional demonstrations of knowledge, additional assignments and projects to complete. So there's more graded work there, and as a result, it's about 60 credit hours to obtain that half credit. And the main reason why anyone moves over to us from an EduSeer, an Apex, whatever it is, it's because of the video-based instruction. You might have heard of Edgenuity. Edgenuity's been around since 1998, and Edgenuity and Imagine Learning came under the same naming convention last November. So what your students would be experiencing is that video-based, award-winning Edgenuity curriculum. So students, whether they're working through credit recovery and hearing these concepts again, or if they're viewing it for the first time, they're getting it from a face, a voice. And we think that's really important, especially if the student is a struggling reader, an emerging reader. To put a bunch of text online, one, it doesn't engage them, and two, it's not going to assist them in getting that credit again or learning that concept again. We really want to attract all types of learners and make it interesting. So let me share my sound here. Hopefully you all can hear this, but I do have a quick video example. This is one of our math lessons, and it also goes over some of the tools that are built inside of the content itself. So what you're going to see is our on-screen teacher. And by the way, we only use certified teachers to make these recordings at our studio in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we don't hire actors for these. As the teacher is working through any text or graphs or maps or imagery that's on screen, you will see interaction with in the form of whiteboarding. And as we work through, let me see.
Linear equations based on real world scenarios. But to do that, you're going to need to know the difference between continuous graphs and discrete graphs.
I know it's hard
so on
for
the
me
left,
to hear
we've
her.
got a
Probably you
continuous
guys
graph
too,
that
huh?
starts at the origin and moves.
Oh, are you able to hear her okay? I just paused her for a second.
Yes, we can hear.
We were fine.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
And on the right, we've got a discrete graph that has several distinct points. So let's define these. Continuous graphs are made up of all points on a given interval, forming connected lines or curves with no breaks. Discrete graphs, on the other hand, have a finite and isolated number of data points, and that's these distinct points that we talked about here on the right.
So what's really nice about these videos, and what you're seeing here is an example of actually a warm-up. The way our curriculum is designed, the students get introduced to a concept that they're going to be learning, where it typically has between 3 and 5 segmented chunks. So we want to make these videos very manageable, very digestible. This video that we're watching here in totality is 58 seconds. What this also encourages and forces really is interaction with the program. So instead of playing a 20-minute video, the students have these 2 to 3 minute videos, and they have to hit the next button. They have to interact in order for the program to move forward. And we do keep track of active time watching these videos and interacting with the system versus idle time where they're just sitting back. Your educators are going to be able to see everything that's going on. But as the students work their way through these videos, they can always pause, rewind, replay if they do want to hear a concept again. Closed captioning is available. This is when we start to get into some tools that are built in, especially to help with exceptional students. We have an e-notes feature here. This is one note-taking option inside of the content. I'll show you another in just a second. We have a glossary with the words to know that are introduced typically in the warm-up of the lesson. And then we have a transcript available. So everything this on-screen teacher is saying, we have those words written out on the right. And this transcript is translatable into over 60 languages. So I saw some of that feedback was about EL support, right? Newcomers and students who speak English as a second language. So even though these videos do play in English, they are able to translate these words into their native language, and we have read aloud available in 7 of those 60 options. You can see a quick list here, and of course, we can send the full list to you if you have any questions about specific languages. Other tools that are available, there is text to speech, especially for the quizzes and the tests that are embedded within the system. Students can have those read out loud to them. Also, if there are any reading excerpts inside of the platform, and a lot of the text is already built in. The only courses that would require textbooks, there are a few APs that still do, like our AP Calculus, AP Statistics, the AP US History courses, to name a few. Some of the AP classes, we actually embedded the text in, but when it comes to any of those core courses that a lot of the students are repeating for credit recovery, again, if there's a reading excerpt, they can go ahead and turn that text to speech feature on, and they can choose the speed at which that text is read back. We also have highlighter tools, calculators built in. Sometimes there are formula sheets and other grammar sheets available. So whatever the student needs in order to get assistance or successfully complete the course, there's a lot that's already right there on their screen. And I talked a little bit about the chunking of the work. Again, we're doing that to make it so that the students receive that information and they have to interact to move on. Also built in are comprehension questions. So once they receive the video-based instruction, the students will answer a couple of questions about what they just heard. And if they get the answer wrong, that same teacher's voice comes through to say, think about it this way, and they give it another try. Or if they get the answer right, there's some positive reinforcement as to why that answer was right. So again, all of this is built into the platform. This is the other note-taking option. So students like to write things down, and it sometimes helps them retain the information. So we created these printable PDFs that students can complete as they're listening to the on-screen instruction. So this would be an amazing tool for those credit recovery students. And I wanted to point something else out. This is our on-demand tutoring support, which a lot of districts have been utilizing for credit recovery students, even homebound students, really a lot of different cases. But what this is exactly as it sounds. I'll pull up a video here in a second. This is something I will tell you, it doesn't automatically come with the content. You can add this on. If you're utilizing our certified teaching services, then this does come with that. But what it is, it's access to live tutoring support. We have an entire team of content area experts, all employees of ours, background checked by us, and they're available for the core subject areas, math, science, English, history, French, Spanish. And by the way, this is available too for the SAT prep or the ACT prep courses. But the students reach out with their question, they get connected to a live person. And if the chat doesn't get the student to the resolution, then they can open up an interactive whiteboard like what you're seeing here. And there's conversation ability. So that's really nice for the world language courses where they do have to do recordings of themselves. That way the tutor can help them through in spoken word. And I did want to pull this up, just talking about, again, your special populations, how we support them over in instructional services, and how too we can train you all on the accommodations and modifications that we make based on what's written in 504s, IEPs, EL plans, etc. So we can change the grade weights, we can change the passing thresholds. Of course, we talked about text to speech and turning the translation tools on. There are a few new tools that we came out with just this past year, 2022. We've always been able to allow additional attempts on assessments, but now we can shorten assessments, we can hide the assessment timer, and we can reduce the number of distractors. So instead of 5 answer options, there can be 2 or 3. And then customizable content. You can do this really for the need of any student, but especially for students that have those documents, you can take content out, you can switch the sequence around. You do have a lot of maneuverability and autonomy over these classes once you get into them. So that's a little bit about the content itself. And I did just want to touch on the certified teaching piece. Hopefully you all have all of the staff you need for summer, for fall, but if there is a vacancy or if you're having trouble finding teachers to work every single subject area this summer, we can at Imagine Learning provide you with a certified instruction to go alongside the video-based content. When you partner with us for certified teachers of record, we provide you with that teacher. For example, the teacher that helped the students out last summer was Dr. Ruby Evans. She's one of our fantastic math teachers. You'll also receive that on-demand tutoring. So again, that comes with the service whenever you partner with our teachers. It actually comes with special education support in the form of coordinators that will do those back-end accommodations and modifications for you The paperwork is shared securely inside of our system. We review it and again, make those changes based on what we see. The content, of course, is part of the package. Students are working their way in a student-led fashion through the content itself. And then we do provide you with a customer success manager or a regional administrator to go over the data with you. We can meet with you as often as you would like. Most partners go every 2 weeks or so to talk about grades, pacing, engagement, communications, etc. And then there is development and coaching that comes with this, just like any of our services and products, where we want to make sure your team can get the absolute most out of it and especially get the data that you need. So that was my very quick and high level overview of our curriculum content and our services. And Bob, would you like to add anything, my friend?
Anywhere, any microphone you can.
Okay, I'll jump up here real quick. No, no, yeah, thanks, Kara, thanks, great job, and we are really excited to be presenting some of this information, but anytime there are questions, I want to say, feel free to reach out. I know that it's always, at first, maybe a little bit intimidating to use a new platform, but we have a ton of great help and a ton of great people that can meet you wherever you're at. So thank you for the opportunity to present tonight.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions specifically to the Edgenuity folks? No, okay. I actually have some questions for our folks, but we appreciate you jumping on and giving us an overview. I'm sure a number of us have not seen a program in that detail to be able to really wrap our heads around what it means and what it involves. But my question is, we have some numbers, a couple dozen students, and I'm trying to find the where'd we go? Yeah, 15, 14 at Vernon Hills, 15 at Libertyville for the current year. Are those a mix, or are they more credit recovery, or are they more? What's the mix on that?
So they are a mix. We have some students that are doing some credit recovery, but most aligns with our graduation requirement that they weren't required for. And then we do have several students who so we are supporting the students that way as well too.
Do you anticipate these numbers to change, or is this just consolidating into one platform so that we can address the needs better?
So right now, we are focusing our efforts on consolidating to one platform, but with all of the wonderful programming that Imagine Learning can bring to us, we plan to investigate that to see how we can possibly expand for our students.
We do have plans to expand its use in summer school for this year.
Yes,
You
so
might want to just foreshadow that. For the
okay.
board.
So for the upcoming summer session, we are utilizing the courses with the teachers for 2 identified courses that we cannot right now find staff for. That's for geometry and for chemistry. So they will be supporting us with that. They'll also be doing credit recovery. We will also be expanding again the usage of the online platform for our homebound students. Right now, we do a mixture of students receiving their work through the Google platform from their teachers. And then we do also have some students who are doing their homebound lessons through IVS. And so we will want to, if they're over 6 weeks, we find it just beneficial for them to just be online. Also to foreshadowing into the future, although we have not finished our investigation yet, we do have several students who are experiencing chronic absenteeism due to some social, emotional, and some mental health and would love to utilize this program as an opportunity to bring them back into a smaller structure setting and then work on transitioning them out into the larger population. But again, that's just foreshadowing ways that we can utilize this program.
Is this 100% district cost, or if they're doing it summer school for initial is some of the cost associated with whatever the fees are for summer school?
Yes, so for the summer school sessions, they are associated with the summer school cost. So that is per the student, with the exception of students who may be free and reduced lunch. I do believe that we pick up the tab for students who qualify for that. During the school year, if a student is interested in doing the initial credit, if they are, again, not free and reduced or McKinney-Vento, they are responsible for that cost.
I was taking a look at the cost analysis attachment, and I just want to clarify. So I don't know why I keep getting so much feedback today. Any thoughts? Okay.
Keep the mic closer to your mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that addresses it. Is there a fee that we as the district pay to retain these services? Or is it simply like pay per course as you go? Is there a yearly? Could you just speak to that?
Yes, so right now will be, one of the things that we will be responsible for definitely will be the professional development, because we want to make sure that they're supported. And so those figures are in there. And then for this year and this year only, we will be doing a pay by course. However, if we do look to expanding the usage of the services, then we will be looking at doing concurrent licenses, and then there will be a cost to the district.
So for this introductory period, it's just pay per course. And then if this is something that we express interest in that's been successful, we can look into investing further.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, other questions, comments?
I would like to just quickly thank Kara for an amazing presentation. Thank you. And thank you, Bob, for taking some time out to come and support.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, Amon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Thank
much,
you.
everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Listen, one Kara. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think I've ever been in a room with two Karas and a
Fellow
Kara.
Kara here.
So I
Represent.
saw that. I noticed that. Thank you. Always good to meet another Kara and Kara. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
thank you. Is there some action item that we're going to be expected to
I think
see?
at the board meeting, you will be approving this particular contract. Yes.
Okay. So more to come on that.
And can I just say, as an educator, that seems like such a dynamic platform. I can't tell you the number of kids just personally I've worked with who would have benefited so profoundly from something like that. Interactive, multimedia, again, so dynamic. It's an incredible tool if it's implemented in a way that can help us bring more students potentially even back to school who are dealing with that chronic absenteeism. I think that's key. It can't be understated how important that is. So thanks for bringing that to us tonight.
Okay, moving on. Employment of employees. We have a list of items here coming up for the board.
Skipped a couple.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Pete. Back up that.
I was just getting excited to move on. Man, we're only at
So while he finds that, does your company fly people out to Arizona to do lessons?
Are you guys
We've
hiring?
got a
John and I are wondering.
veteran environmental.
Yeah, we have a couple.
Veteran teacher here.
Yeah, veteran teachers interested in some side gigs. Yeah. Annual education support staffing report.
So in March, we brought our staffing report for teachers, and now in April, we are bringing our staffing report for our educational support staff. And so the administration team has gotten together and looked at our educational support staff. And for District 128, our educational support staff include office personnel, include aides in the classroom, non-classroom aides, monitors, security. So basically any non-certified teaching position is an educational support personnel. So we, look at our staffing throughout the district. We work in collaboration with the buildings, so Libertyville and Vernon Hills, and transition and look at what their needs are. We evaluate, the needs and what the jobs entail. Some of the evaluation also depends on the student needs. So for example, when we look at special education aides, that depends on the students that are coming in. So Amon, Kelly Hartwig, their teams, the department chairs, plus transition get together. They look at their current students, their students that are seniors that are graduating, students that are coming in and seeing, what student needs are. So if we need one-on-one aids or the number of classes that we're teaching. So that goes all into this process. So it is, that's part of the reason why we're doing this in April. We can't do it in May because that would be a lot of staffing and trying to get that all done at the same time. So the staffing report that we are bringing to you, and I really wanted to encompass everything from last spring that we brought last spring at the staffing report. And so I just kind of want to go through that. When we look at Libertyville High School, there is a difference of a -1 staff. And that was last year at this time. We asked for special services aid, but something changed over the summer and that was never filled. But we asked for it at this time. It just was never filled. But I really want to reflect from last spring to now. Vernon Hills, there were no reductions. At Vernon Hills, we are asking for an additional 1 special services aid, 2 EL aides, but these were approved and hired during the year. Again, that was our Spanish-speaking, Russian-speaking ELA that we hired during the year. But last spring, we didn't ask for them. That came about due to our needs during the year. But I just really want to reflect what happened over this past year. We added a community liaison. This person has already been working and doing a great job at Vernon Hills. And so really, when you look at from last spring to now, it's an additional 4.0 ESP staff at Vernon Hills. But we're only asking really for 1 additional because the other ones were already approved. Transition pathways. So additional job coach and special services aid. And then our 1 administrative assistant. This position was already approved and actually it started today at Transition Pathways. A district office, we are reducing our director of community education. Dan and I looked at that and said it's about a 0.6 because of the hours that they're working. So it wasn't, Diane Phillips wasn't a 1.0, it was about a 0.6. Her administrative assistant position, buildings and grounds maintenance staff, that was due to a death, and that position then was transferred to Aramark contract. Additions then, so we're looking at our community, adding a community partnership administrative assistant that would be working with our new director of college and career readiness, and also assisting, I think, in some other areas in teaching and learning that we want. And we've come up with that name, community partnership, and not, that's what we have right now. If we're looking at maybe changing the name, but that's really what that person will be doing. Assistive technology is our, it goes along with our occupational therapist, and they work with, the reason I have it under district is that they work really with 4 areas of students. They work with Libertyville High School students, Vernon Hills High School students, Transition Pathway students, and then our outplace students. So they really are working across the district. So it's not really, they're not even in our office ever because we don't have students in there, but really I just need it reflected somewhere. These positions were positions that we used to outsource in years past to CEDAW. We've taken them on and we have 2 people now in this position, but we do have an increase of, we had 1.7 really FTE this year, and we're going up to 2.0. So an increase of 0.3 across the district. So in our district, minus of 1.3, But total, again, from last spring to now, we are looking at an increase of 3.7 ES.
Questions?
A couple of, I want to point out a couple of things that will come about in the staffing legally that because we have some reductions, so the Director of Community Education Administrative Assistant, we will have to take a resolution. It's a reduction in force. I've already talked to these individuals. They know that's coming. We've talked about it. They will be, have the opportunity. By doing that, you have the opportunity to give them other positions in the district. And so we are working on that and we're making recommendations then for what those positions would look like. But legally, because it's a reduction in force, not of them, of their performance, but of the position. So you'll see that resolution come across at the board meeting.
Okay.
I've had personal conversations with them so that they're not caught off guard by this conversation tonight or by board.
Okay. Any questions about that process? We don't do it very often.
No.
Okay. Moving on, next topic is the ESP salary and benefit recommendations.
So each year we evaluate our ESP salary rates and benefits. So our ESP are not a union, but we work with them. I work with individuals from all the buildings, meet with them. You know, we try to gather information from our educational support personnel about working conditions, salaries, benefits. I also work with data from other schools in the area, high schools, some of the same schools that we utilize with our teachers. So some are not all in the area. Some might be in DuPage County or Cook County, but we try to look at, you know, other high schools for comparison. It is difficult sometimes to compare other schools that when they talk about maybe an office personnel position, it's not always the same from district to district. So if you look at a teaching position, a social studies teacher generally teaches 5 classes at high school and it's the same. So it is difficult, but we try our best. And all of the schools that I work with try their best to try to give comparisons. And so we try to each year, look at our salary and benefits and make some adjustments. And I did just a little history for you going back to 2019-20, some of the things that we've done, increasing for example, our family insurance premium increases for our ESP. It used to be a set dollar amount per month, and now it's a percentage amount. 403B board contributions were added at the same time that it was added with our teachers. In 21-22, we made some salary rate increases to our starting rates for monitors, security staff, non-classroom aides, which means since we adjusted the salary rate, starting rates, we also changed our starting rate, our rates of our current employees. We added some more longevity bumps. Some retirement bonuses were increased. Last year, we increased our IT staff starting salary increases, which means we also increased some of the rates of our current staff. We increased the vacation days for our new staff, and that's our 12-month ESP. So they used to start at 5 days, and we started them at 10 days now. 403B board contributions were increased. So there's things that we try to do every year and looking at our comparables or comparable schools, but also looking internally at what, we should be doing and what we could also, in talking with Dan and forecasting what we can afford to do. So our recommendation in looking at this year is, now you had already approved last year a 4% increase for next year. So when we brought the ESP recommendation, we brought 2 years. So last year, about the same time that we were finalizing a teacher contract, we brought together recommendation for salary rate increases for ESP to go up 4% for all current staff this year, and then 4% for next year. So we did 2 years of that. our starting salary rate generally goes up by CPI. And so it has matched CPI, but obviously for next year, CPI is off the charts. Back in the summer, Dan and I had kind of looked at a blend of, and I know I wrote CPI in there, but it's really a blend of taking our starting rate and increasing it by 2.9%, which is our largest increase of our starting rate in a number of years. I think on the one chart, I indicated what we had been going up because we've been going up by CPI, which has been 1.4 or 2.1. So this is a larger jump, but I think it'll keep us from having to maybe make some corrections down the road in our starting rates. So again, we'll look at what our starting rates could be next year, but I think 2.9 is affordable, and also will keep our starting rates comparable for other schools. So our recommendation though is that we have a lot of different office personnel positions in our schools, from college resource center secretary, department secretaries across all the different departments, learning support team secretary, main office receptionist, student services administrative assistant, who they do different things, maybe working with the CRC or working with different departments. But over the years, some of their jobs have kind of blended together. They're doing some of the same things. Some of our, our department secretaries might be doing more with budgeting and working with department chairs, working with teachers, but our learning support team secretaries are working with our students and parents and their LST team. And so they were all paid at different starting rates. We feel that we should look at our building office personnel and start them all and pay them all comparable. So it doesn't matter if you're working in the college resource center with students and parents and the staff in there, or if you're working the learning support team, that over the years, we've created these positions and somehow they got slotted at different starting rates. We want to bring those starting rates all together and collapse some of our, now we still have some other pay, we still have 12-month administrative assistants. We still have special services department secretaries that are paid a little bit different. We have sub coordinators. So right now we've got like 9 categories. I like to collapse them down. So I like to at least take these 5 this year for next year and collapse them into one category. It also says, that we're valuing all the work that they're doing. And some of the work, again, maybe working more with staff and budgets, maybe working more with students and teachers. It also gives us flexibility that if somebody wants to move from job to job, that they may be more willing because there's not a pay decrease or a pay increase, and maybe they find another job more valuable. So that's what we struggle with too. At times somebody's in a job, but then they want to go to another job, it pays a little bit less and they don't want to take that pay decrease. So I would like to take all of these, consolidate them in and pay them. And again, this is for next year's rate at $18.76 starting rate an hour. Again, this is based on the other thing I looked at is that our starting rates for the LST secretary, student services administrative assistant at $17.74 was at the lower end of other schools for office personnel, and other schools have consolidated, just collapsed these positions. I would like to start all of them at $18.76, which is going to affect our current staff. The reason it's going to affect our current staff is that there are some people right now below that. And so that means we have to give them raises for next year. We also have some people that are maybe just at that amount or just above that amount. And if we bring in somebody new at $18.76 and they're only making, $18.80 and they've been here for 3 years. Yep. So what, we wanted to do was really band our staff. So the newest staff that had been hired in the past, 1 to 4 years, they need to get a little bit of bigger increase to get above that, $18.76. So they're already getting a 4% increase. That was guaranteed. And now they're gonna end up with, 6 to 8% increase that stay above that 1876. As your years of service go up, we're still giving them some increase. They're getting 4%, but that 4% now is maybe 4.5%, 5%, 5.5%. But because they're, at some point, their I guess their longevity with us, their experience, they're way higher than that 1876, and they're above that. So that's what we had done in the past with our IT staff. And when we made the changes for the monitoring and security, we kind of banded it and went from there. So that's our recommendation for next year.
There was a lot of conversation around, because that was happening at the same time that the coffee occurred.
Yeah.
So there was some angst about, in particular, people who have been here, 10 years. So I'm glad to hear that you've addressed that. I don't know that it necessarily, I couldn't tell, is it going to address it so that the people that were saying, you don't value a 10-year employee by giving them a significant raise, is this going to, that you said 4%, that's significant.
So there's two things I think that happen with, support staff that have been here for a number of years. There are some longevity steps that are involved. So there's 8, 12, 16, and 20. So in a year that you hit one of those longevity, you get the 4% plus what the longevity is. For like year 12, it's 1%. So that year you would get a 5% raise in longevity. So, over time you're getting, a 4, historically we've been, like 3.5, 3.5, 3.8, 3.8, 4. And then if you hit that longevity, you get 1% more. So which gives you a nice little bump as you go to the next one. I think your question is, if I've been here 15 years, and the person that's been here 3 is getting, a 6 to 7% raise to stay above the starting rate, why am I not getting the 6 to 7%? And so we looked at that, and we're still giving them 4% plus a little bit more, but we felt that they're above the starting rate enough, but to give everybody, I think, that 6% raise, we had to bring up some of the newer staff just to get above the starting rate. And that's why we kind of, looked at the banding of it.
I think we partially addressed it. I think one of the things right now we were focusing on the clerical team that we're talking about, and some of the issues that were being brought up were greater than that. They were being voiced from people beyond the clerical team. So we would want to study that next year. The idea of waiting until 8 or 12 years to have a longevity clause in today's workforce, that doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. So Bryant is committed to gathering again the leadership from the ESP teams and talking about how can we, in an affordable way, make sure that those people who are here for 3, 6, 9, whatever the areas might be, are seeing raises that reward people for staying on and being dedicated to our district.
I mean, that's what we kept hearing over and over, that we are losing people because they are moving. But well, my first question is, are the comparable districts that we're using for our ESP comparables the same comparables we use for admin and for teachers?
Yes.
Okay, so we're using apples to apples. And that it came up several times that there's a disparity between the raises that we've been giving our admins versus what we're giving our ESP. And that we are having staff retention problems because it's their rate of salary, they're worth out in the marketplace. I mean, I understand that we are not valuing our most experienced when it comes to aides and clerical workers, and that as that starting salary is increased, we have people that have been here for 20 years and made a commitment to the district that are earning de minimis over those that are only been here 3 or 5 years. And I don't think that's the position that we want to be in. So I guess my question was, do we not have a band system, kind of like our teachers? Of why would we not move to more of a banded system with these different positions? You know, when the supervisor of security is making 25 cents more than somebody else that's been here only a fraction of the time, that doesn't seem logical.
Yeah, so we do not have a banded system. What we do have is that, so for the last 5 years, for example, in FY20, the starting rates went up by 2.1%. Current people went up by 3.8%. In the next year, FY21, the starting rate went up by 1.9, but current people went up by 3.8. The following year, 2.3 for starting, 3.8 for current people. So the starting rate is going up. And then once you get here, your rate is going up higher than that starting rate. So you are staying, higher than, for example, last year, the starting rates only went up by 1.4%, but people here went up by 4%. And then next year, the starting rate's going up by 2.9, but current people are going up by 4. We have added those longevity pieces in there. So 8, 12, 16, 20. I mean, one thing we could, again, I think, yes, we want to look at some type of system that might be better to keep our staff around. It has been difficult, especially with our aides. That's our highest turnover is in our aides. Our aides now, their rate is the higher starting rate than our other staff. But it's still hard to keep them. They're looking at that hourly rate. Again, it's also a 10-month job. So they're not guaranteed any work over the summer. We try to offer work. So you don't have that. The one thing that we do offer, but it's hard because not everyone needs it, is benefits. So we pay 100% benefits for our staff, our educational support staff. We pay 60% for family, but the 100%, we have some aides that might be with their parents, still, or you might have somebody that has a significant other and they're with them and they don't need the benefits and they really want the higher salary rate. But that amount for, a PPO plan is significant. And that's comparison. So we do try to pull some stuff this year from the private sector. It's hard to find starting rates, but at the same time, they may have a starting rate of $20, $22, but there's no benefits. For a comparable position where we're paying 100% for.
Private sector doesn't get a guaranteed 4% either.
Yeah.
And even just like to give you a frame of reference, the 100% PPO coverage is in $9,000 to $10,000 of value. And the other thing I just want to be clear, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly about, for example, security, and that they're, maybe a supervisor that's just a little bit more. I just want to be clear, like that. I don't believe that would be accurate in terms of the data. Like the supervisor would be nearly twice what a guard would be, like a typical campus safety person would be. But even like help us zoom out a little bit. This particular thing is going to affect 23 ESP. We have 182. All right. The reality is the system does not have capacity to give everybody 10% raises. It's not possible. So you have to kind of be creative and careful on where you try to look at target these. And it's not easy to do. It's very difficult to do, to know what is the right thing to do in the situation. So we try to use market data. What do other districts do? We try to look at, where are we doing? So none of this is perfect. So I guess what I'm saying is we have 182 ESP that are inclusive of the 23 that you have to be careful about what you're doing, because that stuff adds up. You got to remember, we're nearly $100 million organization. And so, yeah, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but we also have a lot of people that are employed here too. And there's a lot of things that happen in this district that we have to be careful to make sure we can afford continuing to do. And then in terms of the banding, perfectly fine idea. what has been a long-standing tradition in this district is everybody contributes and everybody gets the same. I remember that clear as day when I first got here, and people who've been around here for a long time know, like, that was the mantra, like everyone gets the same. So everyone got an equal raise. But now I think we're trying to sit back and ask the question, like, is that equitable? Because maybe the newer people, like our teacher structure is newer people get brought up faster. And then once you get to a particular level, it really kind of slows down. You're more in like a maintenance kind of thing. Should that happen for more other groups is really kind of what we're talking about. So it's a different philosophy than how we've been talking for a long time. So just a few kind of big picture things to think about.
Well, also in the number of categories that we have, like, why do we have so many different categories and starting?
This goes some way to reduce that.
Yeah.
By
That's part of it.
And I know that's
Making
what you're
sure they're
saying,
aligned.
start bringing
Yeah.
this together.
Yeah, so when I started here 6 years ago, I think there were actually a few more categories. And I put them together, like the non-classroom aides together and the monitors and our security. Their rates are all the same because sometimes they're interchangeable during the day. So you may have, monitor in a room, but they need lunch. So a security staff may cover their lunch, or another non-classroom aide is covering their lunch. So one time those were all different. We adjusted those back all in FY22 and made them the same. So I've been trying to kind of do that over time. You just can't, I don't think you could just snap your fingers and do it all at once. And again, I think the goal next year is, again, once this gets done, is to evaluate some other things. What else can we do? Can we look at longevity things, increases? Can we look at other avenues? Obviously, anytime you look at something, it does cost money, and, we have to evaluate that at the same time. But I think we're trying to show that every year we're trying to do something for our educational support staff.
At the end of your conversations with the ESP, was the general feeling that you had arrived at a common good?
So, it's difficult because it's not like there's a negotiating team or anything like that that we meet with. So I don't want to put anything back on them that, I get some feedback from people that, about these positions and, that they are interchangeable, that they're doing, why is my job that, again, I'm working with students and families quite a bit. Why am I valued less, or why am I valued different? So it's getting, some of that feedback, getting everyone inputted their responsibilities and what they're doing, and reading through all of that and reading feedback and meeting with people. And I know both Denise and I have met with individuals and some groups of people, and trying to take time, to get to know, and then also getting feedback from our administrators in the building, people that are working with them. So I'm hoping that this, does help, and it makes some strides to where we want to go. And again, we'll evaluate it after this year. So.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
This will be something we vote on in the board meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on, employment of employees, just a list of folks we'll be voting on at the upcoming meeting. Any questions or comments specific to this?
One question about the previous one. Would that be part of the consent agenda, or that's its own thing, right?
That's going to be its own thing because it's not something that you do regularly.
Normally.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay. But the employment of employees will be part of the consent agenda. Okay, hearing no questions or comments, we'll move on to educational tours. We have 4 listed here.
I want to go on that Italy one.
Yep.
The one that involves
It's gonna be
Croatia.
nice.
Croatia.
Yeah, Zagreb.
Yeah, how can we manage that?
I do have a question about our educational tours, a general question. I had some feedback from the public about one of our spring break tours, trips, and they were great. had a wonderful time. As always, our students were fantastic, but there were some significant issues with allergic reactions.
The
And
France trip.
yeah. Just looking at our processes for that and assessing, trying to make sure that our teachers and our chaperones aren't subject to that kind of duress.
She on? Testing.
Try again.
Did you green
So
light it?
we have,
Yeah, it's,
we have a form that the parents complete. Michelle is very good about monitoring like all of that. And so when they leave on the trip, they have all of that information. And so we did get that feedback too. I think that's something that we have to think about, especially when they're going abroad and, you know, knowing that we couldn't have foreshadowed that they were going to France and maybe, the restaurants really are not too keen on making modifications to things that are on the menu and those types of things. So I think we do have to work on that. Brian spoke to our attorney about our ed tours. And so we've prepared a document for him with, here are the procedures that we have published. And then Michelle prepared another document that says, well, here's what then actually really happens. And so we've sent it to our attorney and he's reviewing that and we'll be making some recommendations for us to take into consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had 19 trips over spring break. And the majority of them were very successful, but we did have some hiccups.
Yeah, well, and that's how we learn, just, trying to make sure we're looking at our processes and revising them accordingly so that, especially with larger trips like that. I mean, when
Yeah,
you
that
get
was
into
a huge
those kind of numbers, becomes more complicated.
Yes, but we are working on that.
Good, thank you.
any other questions specific to any of the trips? Okay, those will come up in the board meeting. A proposed committee and board meeting schedule. This pretty much mirrors what we've been doing. Normally, if we had some kind of changes happening to the board, I would say, let's wait until after next meeting, but since it looks like we'll all be returning, I think we're good with this.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All I needed was one vote.
And
I think there was one thing
I
on,
needed one. I voted for her,
I
so she
voted
got
for
the
her.
one. Voted for
We're done.
Lisa out there.
Yes,
so
thank you.
We all.
Likewise. But Brian, were you
okay.
gonna
I
talk
think-
about, the one change
Yeah,
that
the-
needs to be made?
yeah, the April 22nd was the beginning of Passover.
Oh, okay.
So we could either move it to the 29th, or we could move it to the Tuesday.
So Tuesday's not gonna work because we do celebrate the
Okay.
second night
Tuesday's-
of the holiday as well,
Okay.
but the 29th would work out great.
The other change that we did make that's different from this year's calendar is in the January dates, because we have that return from the winter break. And we had our meeting on that first Monday night back. That was a challenge for us to get all the materials ready and everything. So we did shift the dates in the January meetings, also to align with the Ed Red dinner that several of you have been
Right.
attending.
Which we always come back and do later, but might as well do it up front. Yeah. Okay. So what will be in the packet for the board to approve will be the new one with those adjustments. So that makes sense. Everyone good with that?
I forgot Lisa was out there and
Yeah,
online
thanks
with us.
Lisa for the.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. Hi, I'm out here.
Okay, so that looks like we'll see that adjusted for the board meeting. Board reflections and insights from the retreat.
Again, Lisa and I want to thank everyone for giving the responses that you did for the follow-up survey, and we'll be sharing those results. She and I haven't had a chance to look at them and make our own analysis. But we did want to offer an opportunity for the board if there were any insights or anything. It was an open meeting, but I think that anytime we get together and talk about our leadership and what we can do to improve our leadership, it's an opportunity for us to share some highlights of that with our community.
I just want to share that I really appreciated not only us being able to gather in that setting, but to gather with the administrators from the district and really share our common goals for the district and really common expertise, whatever. It just, like I say, I learn every time I come to these meetings, but that night was exceptional, and just to be able to share that in a long-term setting, although tonight's getting to be long-term too, but in a, in a setting that's not constrained by time or agenda or anything, we were able to really do. And Dr. Zabilka does such a great job leading those.
Yeah,
So
the
I appreciate
facilitators
it
were,
too. Yeah.
were really good. Helpful.
Anything else?
Agreed.
Look forward to seeing the results of the survey. Anyone want to comment on the roundtable coffee discussion reflections?
Again, because no more than 2 board members can attend any one thing, otherwise it would be a meeting. We wanted to have an opportunity, if you did want to share any insights that you
Well, that was
gained.
kind of my question. How do we share? I took a lot of notes and I kind of organized them and turned them into an outline that I thought would be helpful. Most
Well-
of it is just kind of my. So
Right.
what is the best way to be sharing what we heard?
Right now, verbally, if you were to type up your notes and share them, those would be FOIA-able. And so I think it's difficult when you're an individual board member at an individual event to share your written notes, because then they become a document from the board. So I think what we're doing right now is trying to model how, when we each attend individual events, we can report out, and you can send some things that you'd like, but as soon as you put some of those things in writing, they do become a board artifact, and that's okay. I just want you to know that that would be, it goes beyond your personal notes, and it then becomes something you're submitting to the board as an artifact from that
I
meeting.
mean, I'm looking at the clock and I don't want to do
Yeah,
that tonight. So I wouldn't, absolutely. I know we've talked a lot tonight and I don't want to do that. So I know we have 2 more coming up. So maybe we make sure our agenda leaves us plenty of time to share and come up with some common themes and.
We can include the additional meetings and give some time to think about how you want to share it.
Now is the time to talk about that, because I can't go to either of those. I'd love to go to both, but I'm going to be gone for both.
Either of what? The next ones?
The next
I think I'm
ones.
on May 4th.
May 4th. Okay, great.
Is there one in April, like this week?
April 27th.
Okay.
So I can reshare the dates and
I did that this morning. I think everyone
Right.
had that in their inbox.
So now I think you're actually on the calendar for the 27th.
Yep, I know I picked April. I wasn't sure which exact date.
I reshared the dates. I don't know if I had access to what you guys had already picked. I just wanted to send a friendly reminder. So that people
So
knew.
We know
April
we have at least
27th at LHS, Sonal is signed up. And May 4th at Fernando Hills High School, Casey is signed up. So there is room for 1 more at each of those events if someone else would like to add on. But certainly if your work schedule does not accommodate, that's very understandable.
Yeah, I'm looking into trying to do my schedule for the 4th.
Great.
But if we could have, if we could set aside in future agenda to make sure that the rest of our agenda might not be so packed, that we can have some, a good amount of time to discuss.
Since we haven't even gotten to F and F yet.
Yeah,
I know.
we still have another meeting to go to. No. Okay, all right, so we'll leave that at that. Future agenda items, you can review what's on the list here. We have a number of things coming up for April and May. Unless somebody has something earth shattering on that. Okay, I'm going to recommend that we adjourn the Program and Personnel Committee meeting. Couple minute break for facilities and finance. So get up and stretch a bit. So meeting adjourned. Thank you.
47.
Okay, it's 8:47. Time to call to order the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, April 10th. We already did the pledge. Been so long, we should probably think about doing it again, but invitation for public comment. Is there anyone present that would like to address the board? Where'd everybody go? Okay, guess not. Moving on to items for discussion. Item A, disposal of some equipment. Looks like we have some LHS track and field equipment.
Yeah, that was equipment that got damaged. And so
Okay.
we had to replace it, but you're talking, it's like $30,000 worth of equipment. So technically, I think per our policy, we could not include it because it's worthless now. But we felt it was important enough to list it. Plus, it's an asset that we need to make sure that we take off our list now. So,
Okay, and this will be up for approval at the board meeting.
yes.
Okay.
Consent.
I just wanted to clarify with that item, so that will not be an every 5 years expense. You said it was due to damage, correct? Okay,
Yeah.
it's a costly piece of equipment.
Cover animal damage.
Our deductible, the deductible is higher than that, but it might. Trust me, we tried. Yeah, I definitely tried.
Any other questions, comments? Moving on to item B, capital project prioritization. This has been the fruits of a long laborious project.
Yep. So I won't reread what I wrote in there. I'm assuming you've had it read. But here's the summary. We have the list by prioritization. And so if you look at that list, you can see the projects that were submitted and the committee's score for each of those. And so the committee that showed you the committee people, we went through every single thing line by line. And the net results was this, with these projects scored in this way and kind of sorted in that order. And the sense from everybody on the committee, it was like, okay, do we feel like this makes sense based on all the criteria that we walked through for whatever 5-6 hours we were together? And the sense was, yeah, this makes sense. So here we go. And also, like, we've never done this before. So this is new for us. So this is not like an established process that we've had for years and years and we're doing it. So we're trying this for the first time. And so I think we learned some things. But I think in general, we're felt like that this was a fair process to go through. So you have the list there. I guess before I go any further, any questions or
So you feel like the metrics that we're using to make these decisions were working and were clear?
Most of them, yes. I would say I'm not the only one that was on the committee.
Yeah.
All these people were on the committee.
Yes.
I would say
Jump
a
in.
lot of them were. I think there was a few criteria that we felt like, I feel like it's kind of saying the same thing as this other criteria. So we added inclusion, student impact inclusion. And we also have accessibility, ADA accessibility. And as we were kind of going through, we kind of were realizing if something increases accessibility, it also increases inclusion. So like, are we basically like kind of double counting that? And the sense was maybe we are, and that's what we want to do. But one of the senses was maybe we can be a bit more clear on what we're talking about for that particular one. So that's one example I could give you.
I was just going to ask you what you meant by student inclusion. So I guess.
Does this allow for students to be more included? A variety of are any students more included because of this project?
How do you score something that's like the library that every student can use though?
So I would say that gets reflected in student impact in terms of number of students. So that
Okay.
would get reflected based on all students would use this. But for example, not necessarily all students would use the art rooms, for example. And so we tried to reflect that difference. All students use the cafeteria, guaranteed. Not all students are probably going to use, pick another thing on that list. So, and I gave you access to that information for you to kind of see kind of where the committee landed. on some of those things. So
I appreciate that. I
mhm.
appreciate the backup data on that.
You know, as someone sitting on the committee, you know, we would go through each, you know, one individually, not be comparing it to other ones. We would be going off of the information given to us, the reasons given to us, we would score it. In the end, when we then looked at the total scores, we're like, it actually kind of made sense, the order that they fell. And again, that was not like, oh, what did I score on this one over here? I want this one to be more. It was looking at each one individually and scoring it. And then in the end, you kind of looked at it and said, yes, this seemed to work itself out. But there, yeah, I think there are some things that criteria that maybe just needs to be adjusted, but for the most part, it was a step in the right direction, a good direction.
Yeah. Me, when I looked at the priority list, but I did have one question as I was going through it, when I was looking, not for now, just in the future, as you are thinking about how this committee is working, since we're always talking about the same thing, we might all have the same lens. Would it be helpful to have some other perceptions of what other people might think is a priority, a different priority when coming up with these projects? People who are working in the buildings, I don't think it would have changed the scores, but at least it offers a different lens. I think we talk about these projects all the time. We kind of have what we think is not a priority. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. That was my one question when I was thinking that maybe it would be helpful to have different lenses and how that might change the total scoring.
Do not Tom and John both sit on this committee?
So
They submitted several applications for it, so they did not.
So they don't sit on the committee at all. Okay.
Well, they sit on DLT that generates ideas
Processes,
for all of
right.
these. Yeah.
Okay.
But part of this process, they intentionally didn't want to be part of the committee, just to like let it be. I think the intention was to let it be a little bit more independent, rather than. I'm guessing here, but rather than maybe a principal trying to advocate that their buildings project should be, you know, and rather than another buildings, I think they were trying to like let it be independent.
Yeah,
That's what I would guess.
But the input came from the buildings when they submitted it. So it
Yeah.
wasn't just Tom submitting it or John, but it was working
Right.
with the department chairs of the teachers and submitting it. And then they also scored it and gave their
They did.
score, and then we scored it, and, you know, looking at their criteria and their score. And then that's when we made
So that's actually what I was trying to kind of indicate, is that because Tom and John submitted requests, so to speak, with those scores, to me, it seems like it passed through the building lens, people who were actually in the building. So I took that as, you know, they interpreted what they had heard and experienced and seen amongst all building stakeholders and put it through.
Right. There are many voices
Yeah.
in each of those applications.
Represented, right?
Yeah, I didn't understand that or read it that way. So that makes more sense.
And more to your question in terms of just like other voices and having other perspectives, I think that's a great idea. I think our process was intentional to try to mitigate even some bias perhaps, and that's why we tried to have a standard set of criteria to walk through, meaning it doesn't matter that I think any particular project is, I have to look at that specific criteria and weigh that criteria, like, you know, I mean, rate that descriptor against the criteria that we set and how significant that is. And I think the significance is going to be, for some things, is going to be subjective. We had a lot of times we're like, is this a 1 or a 2? Like, this feels more like a 1. This feels more like a 2. But I would say, I'd be honest, I think as the committee, there was a handful of the times that we had to say, okay, well, then we're just voting, because almost all the time it was unanimous. Everybody was like, yep, I think that's a 3, or I think that's a 2. It was a pretty consistent process. But yeah, adding more voices to something like that is great. And that's why, like, hopefully the criteria we have will give you a consistent result, as long as we help make sure people are aligning to the criteria.
Right.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So first one on the list, 35 cafeteria. So that seems like that's a go, right? Nowhere on the list does it indicate price. So let's say that's a $2 million project.
Mhm.
So that might be the budget for that summer. So that pushes bathrooms and LST down on the list. Right? I mean, what are we spending? $4 million a summer or something like that?
Yeah, so there's an attachment in there to give you a sense. So even this prioritization is one part of a bigger process. And so the step we were at is prioritizing them irregardless of cost. Don't let the more expensive thing or the cheaper thing be a higher priority. Like, get it against the criteria that we value. Now, the next step is for us to put timing and cost data associated with this to get a sense of like how long are some of these projects. Some of these projects we know, like cafeteria, we've talked about it before, so we kind of know the timing of these. But bathrooms, we have got to get a sense of how many there really are, because there's a lot of bathrooms in this building that need renovation, but there's a bunch that don't either.
Right.
We got some new additions that the bathrooms are brand new. So we got to get a sense of the scope and like how long would it take to do some of these projects and get in some idea of cost really for all of them. And so that's what we're gonna bring back next month, is a very, very rough cost. Like, is this 1 million or 10 million or a couple 100,000? What is it? And so we're gonna try to flesh those out to give you that idea. But even after that, we've got to see how that fits in with a short-term plan, which would be like the summer, but even the long-term plan. Because this is the third category. Like, we've got health and safety, which is first, asset preservation, which is second, and then this category. And so we've got to look at all of them together. And, I'll go back to what I presented. It was over a year ago now, but our long-term capital plan, elephant in the room, is there is not enough. We do not have enough existing money right now to do all these projects on the list. It's just not, it's not mathematically possible with the resources we have. So we have to prioritize. And so we're going to need to look at how that goes. And I will say particularly Vernon Hills is the one that's popping, and it's going to be popping over the next couple of years because that's at its age life cycle where all the roofs we need to start replacing. And there's a bunch of roofs, and roofs aren't cheap. Even to replace them as cost effectively as you can, they're not cheap. And so we really need to kind of look at all of that together. So this is still another step in the process of trying to figure out how do we.
Dan, it might be
How to build
helpful. Could you possibly put up that flow chart just so everybody can, I know it's in our packet, but
Yeah,
it might be helpful just to put it up for visual and.
it might be, it
Anyone
might not be
else?
helpful, but I'll. I think this is it, but let me zoom.
But this is kind of the guiding light of the process.
Yeah, so not.
Basically, this is visually what you were just saying. You don't have to repeat it all. I'm just.
Yeah,
kind of trying to
so
put this
really we're
out there for
if,
public.
if it's a health safety issue or it's asset preservation, it goes to Mark to kind of get on a schedule and look at all those things. And then the next phase is we go to the capital prioritization process, which is we have the results of that process now. Now we need to go back add timing and cost data to these things and then develop short-term and long-term plans. When we say short-term, we're basically talking about what's the summer list, and long-term is what is the stuff that's going to be beyond the summer list that will require. So we are not talking about fitting everything within $4 million a year. We're talking about, we have some core stuff that will fit in $4 million a year. Some of this stuff will be one time in addition to that, like a capital project thing. So you're talking the cafeteria is going to be several $1 million to do. That's going to be a capital project, just like the transition pathways renovation was a separate project. It'll be like that.
Or the pool renovation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the whole bunch that I could list off for you they're kind of separate capital projects that are different than the annual, I guess what I would say annual capital in terms of just trying to keep everything going.
So this list is based on need and impact. And then we'll have to figure out capacity to accomplish them. And maybe some of the ones that are slightly lower on the list, but a very low cost, it could be, and very low, small time frame might be pushed up because we can sneak it in here. We have a capacity here, but the larger ones, we might have to wait.
Yeah.
Till we have the capacity to do it, whether it's timing in the building, financially to support it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like just to flesh out the cafeteria, you can't do that in a summer. It's going to be 1.5 to 2 years to do that. well, you still have to serve lunch. So like getting some of those logistics figured out is going to be important so that we can, minimally disrupt our services as we can.
Yeah, like the parking lot.
Yes.
We do the parking lot.
Yeah.
We gotta have it done in the summer.
Yes,
or as
we've been successful so far of getting parking lots done. I will say the COVID pandemic really helped in terms of giving us a lot of extra time when we did the Vernon Hills, because that was a much delayed project, but you're not in the building. That was.
I was talking about the new permeable one that we're gonna put in back here. That's gonna be a big.
Might take a
project.
couple
an
years
option.
to plan, but we can get it. Yeah.
Right.
I do have a question about under system improvement, health and safety. So health and safety, not the health and safety on your flow chart, but health and safety within the projects. Whose health? How big does that go? And let me go ahead and tell you why I'm asking the question, because I super want solar panels up on that roof. And so when I look through it and I see, oh, my pet project's number 7 on the list, and I start to cry a little. And then I go through and I'm like, well, how can health and safety get a 1 for a solar project? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then I listened to our group tonight talk about how they got grant money to put solar panels to drive the pump for the fountain. And the reason that they got that grant money is because they argued successfully to the Green Schools people that any reduction of energy on the grid means less coal is being burned somewhere. And that coal dramatically affects the population that surrounds that power plant. So when I saw health and safety, I'm like, well, is it just talking about the people in this building? Not to mention, and I don't want to be the crazy environmentalist here, but climate change is real, and anything that municipalities, schools, people can do to mitigate that effect is a huge health concern. So the envelope I'm asking, how big is that? Are we just looking at inside the building? Or is it bigger than that?
I would like to
Anybody
find, I was
can answer
not the only
that.
person on this committee.
Yeah, anybody can answer that.
But I would say, what would you say was one of the best well-written proposals?
Dan's.
I believe the idea, so when we were walking through this process, actually, the health and safety came from the board when we were looking through, here's the criteria that we think we want. Is there something that's missing? And it was proposed like, hey, maybe is there a connection to health and safety? Not necessarily that this is a health and safety issue, but there's a connection to it. And so for us, the idea is this connected either directly or tertiary to a serious safety hazard or a potential serious safety hazard? So like the cafeteria, I think a lot of them scored pretty low in the sense of like, it's not really. The bathrooms, I think, had some connection because they're not necessarily right now, but there's a connection to that. So yeah, I guess.
Well, I guess the other thing is if they were a significant life and safety, they would be on the other category.
Right.
We have a whole nother category
Right.
for things that the ROE or
top
other
diamond.
people might be saying, no, this is something that would impact student or staff health.
Right.
And I think we carried that more discreet definition over to this project. That would be, I think, one area where we realized, even though we had rubric and criteria, we need to refine some of those so that people also writing the application have an even more clear sense of what do we mean by health and safety when we ask that question.
Yeah, because I to be honest, I thought of it as, our responsibility is the people in these buildings, and that is the first priority for health and safety. Not that it's not important that we aren't good, village partners, township partners, et cetera, and be concerned about the health and safety of our village residents and our township residents. But at the end of the day, our first priority is the people in these buildings. And if it's something that affects their health and safety of using these buildings every day, that will, in my mind, always take a priority. So
Yeah, that's what triggered. I mean, I immediately went to the life safety things that we typically discuss within a school district of, the walkthrough that we, people do all the time and identifying those things. And while this is not, we do have that life safety list separate from this. I was sort of interpreting this as something being somewhat connected to that, but not a direct life safety risk that was identified, but could be, ancillary. But I see your point. That's,
But I
you
think
can
we
draw that
did-
conclusion.
Right,
easily.
we did have the criteria about, would this be energy efficient, so.
Yeah, I
a
saw
whole
that.
Separate one, this scored the
It got a
highest.
3 for that.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I remember writing it like, I selected it as a 1 because the connection to me when I was looking at the panels was, right, this is not really connected as like a serious safety hazard in the building,
Sure.
but it is connected to climate change, which is a bigger issue. Like that was part of the connection. I think that was why it was a 1 versus 0. But I don't, like, I had to click through a lot of the projects. I don't know that there was a single one that was like scored really high in health and safety because
I would hope not, because
Yeah.
if it did, then it would be in a different category all on its own.
yeah.
It would
so-
it wouldn't be on this list.
I have one quick question. Is there a reason the auditorium stage flooring was not scored?
Yeah, as we reviewed that, so we opened it up to the principals and their administration we didn't really put hardly any guardrails around whatever they could propose. And one of the things they proposed was to replace the stage flooring. And part of the story was like they had looked at some repairs, but then they looked again and the repairs got a lot bigger. And so the sense was like, well, if you're talking about that much money to fix it, like how much money would it even be to just replace the thing? And so that was what was proposed. But as we talked through it as a team, that felt to us more asset preservation than this category. This category is other is really meant for like renovating things, making things improve.
Educational improvements.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if the stage floor is bad, it needs to get replaced, like that needs to get on an asset, that needs to get on a list.
So this was
get
literally
replaced.
moved to the other.
So that's why we
Yeah.
said NA, that like this doesn't, we didn't feel that this one belonged here. To be honest, even the hall, we had a long conversation about the hallway grids. Like, should that even belong here? But we just decided to walk through that process and see what happened. With that, because that was a similar question of like, I mean,
Mhm.
the grids don't last forever. At some point you have to replace them. The question is like, when you do replace them, like how much do you replace it for something that's already similar to what's there, or do you try to improve it as you replace it? So that was even one that I'd be honest, we're still not totally sure about, I would say, but we did run it through the process.
For the stage flooring, it move up to that next category. If you don't do anything with it there, it'll come up to the life safety because you'll start falling through the floor or whatever.
Yes, it is not
Trip
in any of that
hazard,
kind of.
whatever,
condition.
yeah.
Just want to be very clear. Hello.
Okay, and of course I have one more question. So we had the flow chart. The
Yeah.
recommendation comes down to the box where you're looking at the cost.
Mhm.
What happens to a project if it has essentially no cost? Does that improve its chances? If it's super costly, then of course that would decrease its chances.
Have we ever had a project that doesn't cost anything?
Yeah.
We have?
Solar's one of those projects. It should cost us nothing.
I think at that point, then it's the bandwidth to be able to deploy it. It's the scheduling and how that impacts other projects and that kind of thing, I would think.
So there's.
I
lots
could think of,
different
you
ways
could
to
grant
do it.
fund a lot of things.
We could own the panels, then it would cost us something, then we would be paying ourselves back. There are other ways to have panels put up that wouldn't actually cost us anything. So I'm just wondering, where does cost fit into moving something one direction or another?
I'm thinking.
I'm letting you. And you also don't have to have an answer right now. Like, we're still working this process out, so.
Let me try, and if you don't like it, just tell me. I think what matters most in this process is the priority list. And so we wouldn't want to go one by one. We did not have a criteria in here that said, just because our process did not account for is this a low cost thing, right? Or is this a high cost thing? Like, we did not account for that
Right.
in the priority. So my gut would tell me to be faithful to this process. I would want to follow this priority list and go. And so, stay true to the, and that's me like just trying to think through consistently. And trust me, I'm a very stubborn process person. So if I'm staying with the process to me would say, I'm going through all those other ones first. But if we realize, wow, maybe this is something worth looking at, then maybe we need to look at it. There's a lot of like, there's all kinds of reasons that projects get moved up lists for a variety of reasons. So we haven't really lived through that yet.
So can I say I don't like the answer? I would argue that the cafeteria is the first one. So if we stuck strictly to that, and I'm sort of being facetious here, Dan. If we stuck strictly to that, that means we can't do anything else on the project until we can raise enough money to finish that first project. So I'm being a little facetious, a little sarcastic, but I think there's there's ways we could find grant funding maybe for another project, even.
We
look at
haven't
it.
gone through the entire flow chart yet, though.
Yeah.
We have to
Right.
get the.
Exactly,
How long
exactly.
does this
So that's the
process
next
take?
step.
How long, how much does this cost? So now we have a priority number associated. We need to let the rest of the process work out before we can really look at, okay, maybe this, the parking lot's going to take a year or two, depending on, working with various government
Getting
agencies.
permits, that kind of thing.
So while that may have a higher priority number, it may come after a project, with a lower priority number because of the timing. So I'm, because this is our first go round with this, I'm eager to let the process play out.
Yeah.
and-
Oh, I trust the
and get
process
data.
too. Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because if the opposite was true, I wouldn't want that to impede that. Meaning, if we found actually solar costs a lot more than we thought, but if we said that's the next most important thing, that's our next most important thing. And then we got to figure out, all right, how can we do this? Can we do it internally, or do we need to look for external, help with grants or whatever, you know what I mean? So like,
That's a really good answer.
so.
Not your first one, this
Yeah,
one.
I like, fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So in terms of next steps, so we're gonna look at timing, like how long would some of these projects take? What would be a very, very rough idea of cost? And then start seeing how those fit in with the long term. What my gut is probably for the first 3 or 4 projects to start active development on them. Because I'd have to check again, but I would say pretty comfortably, we've got about 13 million that you could spend and no one is going to miss. Is that a lot of money? Is that not a lot of money? That's subjective, but you have 13 million that you can spend that I think you can hit multiple projects on this list. And I need to see how this fits in with the asset replacement because that is not insignificant. That is not insignificant. So we are in the middle of this process. I feel like we hit a big milestone of having this. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. But we're not done yet.
And I appreciate the time and careful thought that has gone into putting this process together and working through it for the first time, seeing some of the numbers, and I'm looking forward to continuing through the rest of it. Any other comments, questions?
Well done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on, summer project visuals.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have I
Talk
seen
about
these before?
putting it-
Crazy? Like,
Nope.
I don't think I've ever seen these.
No?
Haven't. Yeah, so this
This
is,
is great.
if you like this is Don's credit. If you don't like it, it's my fault. Don and I met, because we had another project that he was curious about more information about. So I was trying to figure out like, what are you looking for? What would be helpful? And so, bit of trial and error and trying to figure that and said, you know what, let's sit down and talk through like, what are some of your instinct in terms of what do you think is helpful to see and what's not? And as we walked through each project, it was really clear that there was kind of 2 categories of things that I think Don thought, and even thought that, and I agreed that would be really helpful as we're going through any project is, the last year we had, or this year when we did it, we had the aerial to kind of give you a sense of where are these happening on our campuses. We had the spreadsheet, they gave a little bit more information, but now it seemed like, all right, one other thing that would be helpful is some type of way to visualize the current state of whatever we're talking about. So if it's a parking lot we're replacing, a picture of the parking lot, then showing you the current condition, and then whatever the future, some type of way to visualize the future state. So that could be a picture of what the water fountains are going to look like. That could be a picture of a chiller. It could be a schematic of here's where we're going to do, here's the work that we're going to do. So really like those two categories. And so I thought that's a great idea. And it was like, we can absolutely gather that for the stuff we're doing now. So I said, we'll get working on that together, all the summer projects that we're doing to kind of catch us up. To say, like, here's the visuals for, here's the current state and here's what's the future state to the best of our sense based on what we talked about. So that's what that is. And so if y'all like that, give Don credit, and we will do this for every project going forward to just make sure that that's part of what we do.
I can't tell you how many days worth of time I have spent on the LHS landscape. And I looked at that picture and go, oh, you just don't even notice it when you're there. So yes, please.
Especially when there's lots of people
It
around.
puts it in such perspective. So it makes it very helpful to say, yes, that's important.
Thank you, Don. Good idea.
It's all Dan.
Yeah.
I think it will also help the public too, understand
Mm-hmm.
how we're investing taxpayer dollars. So I think it's a win-win all around.
Agreed.
Mark,
Oh, there she is.
there she is. Any other comments or questions?
Are
Uh,
we going through any of these?
We can if you want to. No, just appreciate them.
I just had one question about the roof replacement Vernon Hills. There's two pictures there, one with the rocky roof. And then there's another picture that's next to it, but then the schematic only shows the rocky roof.
Right, so it was just representation. Right now you have a roof that has a stone ballast holding it down. The next roof is just gonna be a black roof fully adhered.
Got
It
it.
was just to try to give you a visual, right
That's
now
what it's
you're
gonna look
stone. You're taking a stone off the roof, you're just gonna have a flat.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on to item D, fiscal year 2024 budget adoption timeline.
I think this is the year that we adopt a budget before
do it early.
July 1st. So to do that, this is the calendar that lets us do that. So I gave you some background information, some timeline, legal requirements for adoption, and then a timeline based on that. So if I start back on adopting it on June 26th, and so I played out a bunch of scenarios, but like, all right, if we adopt it June 26th, then that means I have to have that. The latest you can do the hearing is that same night. And so then by law, you have to have notice in the paper and the tentative budget posted 30 days before the hearing. So in order to do that, I'd have to have that posted, I'd have to have that posted May 26th and 27th. I looked at the calendar to make sure I've got enough wiggle room there. And so really the question for me is when I'm talking about a tentative budget, that basically means I'm done with the budget. And between that and the final, I'm trying to check for errors. That's really what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make any key decisions on whether we're going to fund something or not. Like we've already figured that out. It's now, did we make mistakes? So really the question is, can I have basically a finalized version of a budget by the end of May? And I think I can. We are in the middle of all that stuff and I definitely have that train running and I think we can do it. I think there's a lot of reasons why it would be great to have that under that timeline. It'd be great for everybody, all the departments to know before the school is out, what their more or less their numbers are. They've never been able to be in a position to know that before school is out. And we have, I mean, this is not like last year where we're negotiating. We didn't really know, like we know 70% of the information. We just have to bring it together. So we're working on budgeting revenues now, want salaries and benefits the end of this month. And then that gives us to know capacity for the other 28% essentially of our budget. So I feel really good about that timeline. Talk to me in a week, maybe I'll feel different, but right now I feel good about that timeline. It is aggressive, but I don't feel that it's what did we say? It's not a distressful timeline.
You stress, a good stress.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
Do you know of any other district that approves their budget pre-July 1?
The one I was in before I came here. But yeah, I'm sure there are. One thing that is interesting though, like we may run into this, I don't know. The state gives us a budget form to put our budget on. I asked them if they have a timeline for when that'll be ready, because I can't, what else am I gonna do? And they said they do not have a timeline. So if that happens, I'll just have you pass it on the old form, and when I get the new form updated, we're just gonna re-sign it.
Yeah.
Because it was adopted, so that's the best we can do. So that's the only weird thing. But unfortunately, it's a thing. So, but ISB has been trying to they've got more support than they've had before, so they're trying to move things along. But that's just one weird thing that we weirdly may not have that by the time we actually want to adopt. So.
Any other questions, comments?
It makes sense. So many districts are a quarter of the way through spending their budget before they even know what the budget is.
Yeah, and I wanted to, did I give you that info? I did. Yeah, I mean, we've been there as a district. So, but we're on the right track.
Yeah,
Nice.
I appreciate the focus on the positives that will come from that. So, okay. There is a list of future agenda items. Given the time, I'm not going to read them all. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or any comments about it? Oh, I see a hand raised.
Yes, so, for the next board meeting, we got the pricing back, this afternoon for the water fountain replacements here at Libertyville High School. So our budget was $150,000 for the project. Our bid came back to replace it to 6 locations and an optional one on a second floor hallway. Swap that one out. Low bid was $92,800. We add in SDR's price, we're at $99,760. And then the abatement was part of that project, so the abatement cost and then the oversight of it is $29,775. So we'll all in total $129,535. I don't think we don't have to approve the abatement because it's under.
They already approved the abatement under the other.
Right, they approved the other,
they
yeah,
already
this is
approved the
a
abatement.
separate project, but
Yeah.
but we'll have those numbers for you for the board meeting.
So the bids came in
Okay.
for the washroom. We still have the seal coating that we were supposed to have last week, but we delayed opening because we only received one bid. And so we did not want to open that. Because once we open that, the board has to take action, some type of action on it. We did not want to do that. So that one's a little bit delayed right now, but I think we'll end up in a better place with it. So that is not on our list, but that will be on the next board meeting.
Well, I like those numbers compared to the estimate. So, all right. So we will be taking action by voting on that at the board meeting.
Please.
Okay. Excellent. That's one we can add. Anything else? All right. Well, then I think it's time to adjourn Facilities and Finance at 9:26 PM.